Hey folks, welcome back. So today we're taking a look at the full Kickstarter pledge for Outgunned Adventure. Now before we've looked at the original Outgunned, this is the follow-up from Two Little Mice, the same publisher based in Italy. And I've got to say, once again, they've really delivered a beautiful set of books and tons of extra goodies in the stretch goal box, and I'm really excited with what they've delivered so far. And they've just done a Kickstarter for Outgunned Superheroes, which looks equally amazing, and is going to have a bunch of Infinity Stone-like energy shards included with it, which is very exciting for me. It's a big fan of Infinity War and Endgame, so they're going for a cinematic superheroes vibe in the next genre book. And that's what this is, essentially. Outgunned Adventure is the first genre book for the Outgunned system. It's completely standalone, but it also is fully compatible with Outgunned, the original. So you can mix and match roles and tropes and so on from both games, which is one of the strengths of the system, in my opinion, its flexibility and its openness. And you see that as well in the Action Flicks compilations, which we have a volume 2 in this collection as well. So without any further ado, let's dive in and see what Two Little Mice brought us this time. We'll start like we did before with the stretch goal box. You can see once again it's made to look like a lovely VHS cassette. You know, that old school vibe. Stretch Goals Volume 2 label on it there. We have a VHS logo down at the bottom, a movie style poster here, and we even have credits as well. And then on the back, we have the content. So we've got another couple of lovely pictures here, including a scary mummy dude. And in the threshold box, we have 2 sets of dice. We've got 9 adventure dice, 9 ivory dice, 2 grit dice, one of each of those 2 colors. We've got our 3 spotlight coins. We've got another bullet die. We've got some posters. We've got 1 adventure passport. We've got 4 camp coasters. I've actually got 16, but I'll explain that when we get there. We've got 1 plain token, the adventure deck, dice pouch, world map, adventure pencil, which has become a tradition now to have a special pencil in the box since the first game, and the key ring, which allows you to give you something physical to the character who's holding the key item around which the adventure centers, which is very cool. So let's dive in. I'll show you all the cool stuff packed in here. Now, as I mentioned, you're supposed to get 1 pack of 4 camp coasters, but my camp coasters were shipped separately from America. Basically, my pledge arrived in 3 parts due to some mix-up with the distributor. And so instead of sending me 4 coasters, they sent me 4 packs of coasters. 16 coasters, just in case I run out. But these are basically when you go into a camping scene, this is equivalent of like a timeout in the original Outgunned. And so we'll pop one of these open here. So the idea of these guys is that you can give them out to your players, and you can actually use it as a drinks coaster. But when it comes to a camping scene, you've got a moment to take a breather. You can flip it over, and it's a reminder of the different actions you can take. So each adventurer can take 2 actions from this list of choices here. So this is a nice reminder for the players. Of course, the GM has that on the GM screen for themselves as well. Then we have our lovely sets of dice. We've got a totally new visual style here to fit the pulp adventure theme. Stuff like Indiana Jones, The Mummy, those kind of things. Diving into ancient temples, you're evading traps, you've got rolling boulders, all that sort of good stuff. And inside, of course, we have our 2 sets of dice. These were the original dice that came early on in the campaign as part of the all-in pledge. Got a nice holy grail there to represent one of your suits. Got scarabs and the compass here, which also doubles as a kind of 1 result in certain circumstances. And then we have the stretch goal dice that were added. These I love. I think they're just a little bit more readable, basically. Now, just a quick reminder for those of you who don't remember, I would refer you to the Outgunned video I did before. You don't care about the values of your dice and how they add up or anything. You care about matching your dice in this system. So this die here is to track your grit. Now, every adventurer has 12 grit. You can see 12 has a fire mark on it. That means that when you reach that, you gain some extra luck. And here at 8, you have an X. That's your bad box. When you hit that, you get a condition. So you track your grit. You start with just your 1. And then as you go along, you can increase it just to reflect and remind yourself when you get to apply a condition, or when you get your extra luck at the last gasp moment. Now with your dice, you've got 6 different suits, as I mentioned. And your goal is you make a dice pool, and then you roll based on that dice pool, the number of dice. There could be some complications that could take a dice away, or bonuses or help from others that could add a dice, and you can have other modifiers like that. Now here in this roll, we've actually got 2 different types of success. So basic success, like this, is 2 dice of the same suit. A critical success is 3 dice of the same suit. And this dice doesn't have anything. But if it were also a skull, that would be an extreme success. Now if one of these were a skull, that would be an impossible success. And if you somehow manage to get 6, that would be a jackpot. If you get a jackpot, you actually turn into the director for a scene. So you can just play out the rest of a combat with all of your adventures being as awesome as possible. Anything crazy that you want to happen will happen, which is pretty cool. But it's extremely rare, obviously, to get that. Impossible results are hard enough. And one thing to remember is that each result is worth 3 of the previous lower ones. So an impossible is worth 3 extremes, an extreme is worth 3 criticals, a critical is worth 3 basics. And so if you get 3 basics together, let's say you get a couple of beetles and a compass. So these 3 basics you can convert into a critical if you needed to pass a critical difficulty threshold. And that's basically it. Now there are different ways that you can play with difficulty as the director. Now you can have more than one difficulty if you're doing like a complex action, for example, if you're diving and shooting at the same time. So that's the basic idea. It's really quick to understand and grasp as a player. You don't need the special dice. You could use regular dice and just match up the pips. But I do really like the designs. These are high quality dice, nicely engraved and well painted. Of course, the icons they've chosen are thematic. We've got snakes, we've got scarab beetles and skulls and all this cool stuff. So I do really like having the special dice for both this and original Outgunned. And the icons they've chosen are different for Adventure and for original Outgunned to fit the theme. And then we've got this time a bronze bullet. So as per original Outgunned, when you're run out of grit, you tick your last box, then you have a chance of being knocked out of action and being left for dead. So you have on your character sheet a little death roulette, which is designed to look like the 6 chambers of a revolver. You start with 1 in there. When you trigger a point where you need to check whether you're left for dead, you will then roll this die. You add 1 more to your death roulette, and it keeps building up like that. So the next time you get out of all your grit, you put a 3rd pip in the death roulette, and then you need to roll above 3 to get out without a scrape. So the stakes go up as you start to lose more spots on your death roulette. So in this case, if I had 3 pips, I got a 4, so I'm still safe. If I had gotten a 1 like that, then I would have been left for dead, and then I could come back later in the game. I'm not fully dead unless I choose to be, but I have to come back with a suitably outlandish story of how I escaped and came back to rejoin the party. You cannot get rid of the marks on your death roulette except for at the end of a cinematic campaign or at the end of a shot if you're just doing a 1 shot. They're how the stakes build up over the course of a campaign. This game, like the original Outgunned, is designed for shorter campaigns. It's kind of like, you imagine each campaign is like a movie and a franchise. At different key points in the adventure / film, you'll have a chance to advance your character to reflect how they've grown during the dangerousness of the mission. And then at the end, you'll reset everything else back to start, and you can do a sequel or a prequel or move on to a different series entirely. And then we've got our spotlight coins. On set 3, I actually have 4 because if you backed in the first 48 hours, and of course I backed immediately as soon as this was available, then you get an extra spotlight coin. And these coins are extremely useful. So on one side you can see we have our little adventurer complete with hat and a revolver. They're standing in spotlight. So if you have one of these, you can turn it in, and that allows you to do a number of different things. You can get an automatic extreme difficulty success and use it however you want. You can use it to get rid of conditions. You can do all kinds of cool stuff with it. You can also use it to save a friend from death. So if they needed to roll a death roulette, you can give them an automatic success. They still have to add the pip to their death roulette, but now you flip the coin after you use your spotlight. If you're using it for yourself and you flip it and you get heads, then you keep it. If you use your spotlight to save a friend, then if you flip tails, they keep it. So it's their turn to shine. I think that's pretty cool. So there are 4 of these as well to give out to players. Again, I often play digitally, so these aren't a huge deal to me, but it's handy to have them for myself to track who has what. Any individual character can have a max of 3 spotlights at a given time. Then we've got our set of adventure deck cards here. Unlike the original Outgunned, we just have 1 deck, but it is quite large. There's a bit less of a need for as many cards in this add-on, if you like, because this adventure genre is more based on traps and excitement and so forth rather than detailed enemies, which were a lot of the cards in the original Outgunned. Plus in Outgunned you had a complete extra setting book to duplicate basically the world of John Wick, and here we don't have an extra setting book. We do have action flicks, however. So we've got some traps here: wall darts, trapdoors, mechanical statues, cleavers, snakes, shock, blade tunnel, closing doors, slipways, rotating bridge, scorpions, Never great. Revolving walls, flooded rooms, rolling boulders, seas of fire, collapsing floors. Then we have our different character archetypes. We got Daredevil, Guardian, the Hunter, the Captain, the Heart, the Star, the Professor, Technician, the Scoundrel, the Smuggler. We've got the Fortune Seeker, who is kind of a starring role. Basically, this is a more powerful character archetype, and it's kind of designed for use with smaller groups or even as a solo, which is pretty cool. Then we've got our different tropes: Action Archaeologist, Adventuring Author, Born Rebel, Cold and Distant, Cowardly Lion, Detestable Bastard, that's a good name, Dreamer, Flying Steamroller, Gentle Giant, Indispensable Rogue, Parental Figure, Proper Gentleman or Lady, Reluctant Hero, Salty Dog, Wild at Heart, and then we have enemies. What's interesting here is for the supernatural enemies, you actually have 2 cards. You have their basic stats. So here they attack with 2 critical. If they're attacking you and you want to react to it and defend, you need to roll 2 criticals, but their defense is only critical. They have feats that include Immortal, which is pretty tough, and special supernatural actions. And then they've got special actions during a running scene if you're running away from them, which is often the only way to survive initially. Then they've got their minions as well. And we've got big supernatural threats that follow that same pattern. Nagini. And then we've got some special action cards. So these can happen during a run scene. Then we got key item cards. So the key item is a new feature in Adventure. So typically in Indiana Jones, for example, you have something critical that you need to find. And when you find that, you hang on to it and you don't ever lose it because you failed a roll, which can happen with other items. And whenever you would lose it because of a bad roll, you lose grit instead. You can pass the key between yourselves when you're camping with your friends. But if you hand over the item to somebody outside of camp, you lose 1 grit because it's a really critical thing that you just did. And whoever has the key item, and a nice tie-in here, they get to hold this lovely chain here. If you look at the ring, it says Outgunned Adventure Key. So whoever has the key get to hold on to this to represent that fact, which I think is very cool. And so we've got a few key item cards. Then we've got luck cards. This is the resource that replaces adrenaline from the original Outgunned. So you accumulate luck by doing cool stuff, and you spend it to do cool stuff in the same sort of way. We've got quite a few of those. You can always turn in 6 luck at any point to gain a spotlight automatically as well. Then we have some random regular enemies: angry citizens, bruisers, beat cops, guard dogs, poachers, security guards, big intimidating goons, team of mercs, formidable hunters, treasure guardians, military squads, field howitzers, pack of predators, and a tank. So there you go. You notice that the enemies are relatively small in number in terms of the variety of enemies you have, and they're not as complex as the original Outgunned. But as I said, you can port those enemies and feats and abilities right over into this game with no problem whatsoever, and in fact they recommend it in the book if you want more detailed combat. So that's the adventure deck, and then we have our adventure passport. So this is basically our physical adventurer sheets. So this has 6 adventure sheets and travel journals. This is what an adventure sheet looks like in Outgunned Adventure. So here's our death roulette, which I was talking about before. So you fill in from 1 upwards as you run out of grit. Here's your grit track. When you get to the bad box at 8, you suffer condition, and at hot you gain 2 luck, which you can use to power your feats and other abilities. And you can use your luck and burn it to gain +1 to a roll. 6 luck will allow you to take the spotlight. You can mark your spotlight coins that you have on these 3 pips there. You have your name, role, trope, background, age, your flaw, and your catchphrase. Your feats you can put down here. You've got your 5 main stats: brawn, nerves, smooth, focus, and crime. And each of those have sub-skills. And note that you start with 2 in each, and then you have 1 filled in for each skill. So you always have the ability to roll for any given combo of your characteristic plus skill, which is going to be your dice pool for any given thing, but you'll spend points during character creation to specialize, and your tropes will give you more points as well. Then you have your condition tracker here. So if you look hurt, that affects your brawn; nervous affects your nerves; like a fool affects your smooth; distracted affects your focus; scared affects your crime. Your 4th condition that you take will always be broken, which gives you -1 to all your rolls. Tired, it doesn't do anything, but it just adds 1 of the conditions, moves you further towards broken. Then you can have some of the special conditions in here, and broken as well. Guns and gear you mark down here. Guns, you have up to 3 mags, just like in Outgunned. You mark your cash here. You can start with up to 5 if you take the money bags feat. You put what's in your backpack and what's in your bag as well. And then you can accumulate experiences. Of course, treasure. Experiences include things like particular achievements, scars that you get from having a brush with death and making it back to your party somehow, bonds that you build with your compadres, and reputational developments. So if you do things like take down, a whole Nazi occultist legion, you could gain reputation experience from that. So we've got a bunch of blank characters like that, and then we have our travel journals. So you can describe the names of the adventurers and their roles. You fill in 1 diamond for each advancement. Put in details of any ride that you have, which would be, a car or plane or blimp or whatever. You can describe what happens in the shots. Then you can put in what you know about your rival, the name, their desire, the heat level. They've got strong spots. They've got weak spots as well. The director gains 1 heat point when the heat rises to 6, 9, and 12, which are marked out here with skulls. And those heat points can be spent to do various bad things to the adventurers. You mark down your clues. You can mark down the treasure you're looking for as an image and put an image of the key item. Any contacts that you've made along the way or useful notes you can put here. So very handy to have that for the group. And that's basically all you have here. You've got sets of 6 of each of the travel journal and the character sheet, which is very nice. And then general notes pages as well at the end. Very nice and really lovely sort of linen texture to this, as well as you'll find that on all the softback elements of the Outgunned Bonanza here. Then we've got our lovely Outgunned pencil. So this time it says, break this to cause a distraction or to defeat an enemy thanks to your knowledge. But once you break the pencil, that's it. You only got 1, so gotta use it carefully. Then we got a little plane, which goes along with our world map. Now, we've got our poster maps here, or posters rather. So here we have a lovely large size image of what you'll see on the director screen. Then we have a world map. Now the world map is supposed to be used with your little plane. So if you remember from the original Indiana Jones movies and similar films, that kind of pulp aesthetic, whenever they fly to somewhere interesting, take a long journey, they would skip over that and have a little plane tracing a path. So you might fly from New York, go to Cairo, and there you go, So it's just a fun little thing to add to the table experience. And then finally, we have a poster for Action Flicks Volume 2. Oh, not finally. Okay, we have a poster for Action Flicks Volume 2. But you can see our badass mascot for the franchise here. She's won a giant frog. She's got a Nerf gun of some sort. It says, this year, get used to being outgunned. Action Flicks Volume 2. And then we have one more poster. And this, I'm expecting, will be the cover art. And indeed it is. So this is the cover art we have on the core rulebook. Lovely to have a nice big version of that. Daniela Giubilini delivers again throughout this game with amazing artwork, just non-stop, one after the other. It's amazing that such a small team can produce such a high quality set of goods. So that's our look at the stretch goals. I need to cram all this stuff back in here somehow. Well, that is our stretch goals. As always, very generous from Two Little Mice. Now, what do we get as far as actual books? Well, we don't have the secondary setting like we did with the original Outgunned with the John Wick-alike World of Killers, but we do have a much bigger core rulebook. It's 264 pages. I think it's about 32 pages or so longer than the first Outgunned. Then we have our big 210-page Action Flicks Volume 2, which of course gives you lots of ways to mutate Outgunned and Outgunned Adventure to suit your different fantasies. Then you've got a lovely small director screen, nice and compact, with a very beautiful feel to it, lovely texture. And here we see again the art we saw on one of the posters, now on this nice A5 sized unfolding director screen. And on the flip side, we have basics of the director's cut system, which powers Outgunned and Outgunned Adventure. So you got your action rolls, reaction rolls. You always have a minimum of 2 and a maximum of 9 dice. Your different difficulties, basic, critical, extreme, and impossible. Your multiple difficulty rolls, extra actions from extra successes, how jackpot works, rerolls and free rerolls, going all in, what happens with a failure, luck and spotlight, help and hindrance, so things that can benefit your roll and things that can negatively affect your roll. You can do an assist as well, so basically you can leave an extra success on the table to help somebody else. Then you've got your camp actions referenced here, you don't need a coaster. Then we've got our dangerous rules, so you lose grit if you fail on these. Then we have damage control, and then you've got your grit and how that works, your hot box and your bad box, how to recover your grit, death roulette, basic combat, how to use cover, how to use mags for your guns, 3 kinds of traps, trigger traps, deterrent traps, and deadly traps, which are an extended roll or run scene typically. And then they talk about run scenes right after that, nicely placed. Then we've got our special rules for supernatural enemies, which have 6 feat points, and you can turn up to 3 of their grit boxes into bad boxes, and they will know up to 4 special actions, which they can use when they hit a bad box. They can also rely on a multitude of minions, who are normal enemies that have who share 1 supernatural feat from the supernatural enemy they serve. And finally, we have the rules around key items. So all the basics you need are there, and then we have our introductory 3-shot campaign called The Fall of Atlantis. I won't go into detail on this, But once again, it's really nicely put together. And then there are 4 pre-made adventures: a daredevil, a captain, a smuggler, and a professor. And we have the treasure, we have our rival, and then we get into the different shots, which I will skip merrily through. There are puzzles to solve, there are traps to avoid, things to find, including Atlantis, apparently. There are blimps, looks like, airship stuff happening, Atlantis stuff happening, more puzzles, enemies, and then we've got our pre-gens here at the end, so we can see what a completed character sheet looks like, which is nice to have hard copies of those. We also get those in the action flicks as well to give us example characters. Here we have Segong Ye-jun, aka June, Smuggler, and Raymond Suri, the Professor, as well. And then we got some player handouts. So really nicely set out. I think probably much like the first Outgunned, this case file is going to be quite linear and kind of intended to be that way. The idea here is that, you're being introduced to the system, and so the adventure itself shouldn't be too complicated. It might be a bit railroady at times, but it'll help you really understand how the system works and gradually introduce more and varied threats and traps and interesting things that you need to solve. And I think that works out pretty well. From there, you can sort of flex your creative muscles as a director and add more player choice and agency. But I think a good intro adventure should be a bit linear to make it easier for everyone. Then we got a new addition to the game system, which is really great. This is the Assistant Director. So it's solo rules and a mission generator for Outgunned. And what's interesting here is that we have a mission generator for original Outgunned and for Outgunned Adventure. And then we've got solo playing rules, and then we've got hot shots, which are 1-page campaign ideas, 4 of which are for Outgunned Original and 4 of which are for Outgunned Adventure. So again, I'm just going to flip through this. There's really cool stuff in here. How to set up a campaign. You can generate villains. You can generate missions and stakes. What's the MacGuffin that you're looking for? Who are the heroes and their allies that might help you? What flaws might they have? How to build your campaign up and your campaign phases. What should happen in your climaxes, your finishing up, and your establishing shots. Pressure and turning points, crisis and showdowns. And then the same again for adventure. It should be a map, not a railroad. Stay flexible and tweak as you go. We've got our rival generator instead of the villain. What's their plan? Where they're starting leads for the players. Adventures and their allies. What's the climax going to be like? You got our adventure phases, so you got your campaign phases, pilot shot, discovery, point of no return, exploration, and moment of truth, and the elements of each of those phases and how they should look like. How you can plan them out, what sort of aims and hurdles you should put in for each of these elements. So it's really helpful for generating missions sort of off the cuff, or adventures off the cuff, as the case may be. Then we got our solo play rules. So you got solo heroes, and there's a solo sheet as well, and you get allies to help you out, so you're not just stuck on your own. And then there's solo missions, solo adventures, solo scenes, and then you get random tables, drama generators, mission generators, clue tables, thematic oracles, unisex name tables, urban location table, store tables, skyscraper location table, world region table, natural location table, desert and jungle location table. And then we got our hot shots, which are just, these are single page ideas for campaigns. We've got 4 for Outgunned and then 4 more for adventure. And then we've got the assistant director sheet. So as you're going through the creation process for your campaign, you can mark everything out in here. And then we've got our Outgunned solo hero sheet as well, which looks quite different. I could probably spend a whole video just on this. I mean, solo gaming is really big now. I'm not a huge fan because RPGs are very much a social activity for me. But I can definitely understand that if you want to test out a game and get used to it before, for example, trying out the game with a group, or make sure you understand how things work, then playing solo is a great way to do that as well. So I may end up making use of it after all. But before that, put these aside and we'll jump into the main books. These are the main part of the menu here. So start with the core rulebook. So you can see we've got our lovely cover here, a standalone genre book for the cinematic action RPG Outgunned. So make sure to tell you it's compatible with Outgunned, but you don't need the original Outgunned to play this. On the back, they give you a nice sort of bit of flavor text here to get you thinking about collapsing floors, creaky bridges, poisoned darts, fire jets, rolling boulders, all that sort of stuff. Adventure's back. A pulp adventure game inspired by classics of the genre from Indiana Jones to The Mummy. In Outgunned Adventure, the players take on the role of brave adventurers in search of an invaluable treasure. Adventure is the first genre book in the Outgunned line. You can play it either standalone or as an expansion to Outgunned. So there you go. As I said, it is quite a bit chunkier than the original Outgunned book, which is nice. Just gives you that feel of value for money. We have nice end papers here, some mysterious looking maps. They always say this in the Outgunned books: these are tools, not rules. So they really do encourage you to hack things and make them your own. We have our credits here. All the art, again, by Daniela Giubilini. Just fantastic. And you can see a lovely example right here. Start out with the basics of Outgunned Adventure and what the pillars of adventure are as a genre. Then we get into generating adventures, the basics of the game, dangers and enemies, guns and gear, temples and traps. Then a special chapter on supernatural threats, which is pretty awesome. And then to adventure, which is actually running adventures, including cinematic campaigns, your rivals, using heat, camps, and advancement. And then there's a pilot shot at the end as well. So there's a one shot in the book as well as the 3-shot campaign. So really plenty of materials here for the new play group to get started. So here we have, again, an introduction to the game in general and mention of the director's cut system where you're rolling small pools of dice and you don't want to score highest or lowest possible number, but 2, 3, and 4 of a kind. The basics of what you need to play. And then they talk about what a genre book is. So there are 2 outcomes here. If you have the Outgunned core book, you can look at this like a mega expansion. So it's a rule book that changes some of the standard outcome mechanics and enriches your experience with additional roles, character options, and mechanics. And it's a richer chapter dedicated to the supernatural. But it also offers simplified rules for combat while adding new concepts like traps, runs, and multiple dangers. Everything is fully compatible, so you can mix and match to your pleasure. And for your convenience, all the rules previously included in the core book are compiled in Section 2 basics of the game. The other option, which is you don't own Outgunned, and that's fine because this book is completely standalone. But if you want to use the original Outgunned to manage adrenaline-paced action scenes, as they put it, then you can pick up the original book to get rules on chases, more detailed enemies, firearms, dealing with range and combat, and so on. It's also got 10 unique roles, and everything, again, is compatible. And they give a brief glossary of terms, which are all pretty straightforward. So we know what a turn is: a scene, a session. A shot is their term for a single session adventure, a one-shot. Cinematic campaign is a series of connected adventures that have an overall flow. So what are the pillars of the adventure genre? Well, first of all, the adventure never stops. Basically, when adventure knocks on your door, it never gives you a clear destination. You have no time to dawdle. You just get thrown right into the middle of the craziness, and nothing ever slows you down. Now, the journeys in the pulp genre of adventure are often about finding a treasure, but the actual journey itself is the real treasure. Oftentimes, you find at the end of these movies that the treasure is terrible, or does something really bad, or needs to be destroyed. It's not about the treasure itself. It's about showing how the characters overcome obstacles together to do what needs to be done at the end of the day, whatever that may be. The other aspect is that mystery is just around the corner. So there's ancient temples, there's weird diaries that rewrite history as we know it. You might find a dangerous sarcophagus with a terrible curse. Strange events will start to happen as you go around your adventure. There should always be mysteries, and not all of them will get answered during a cinematic campaign. Some things will be red herrings, some things will be too dangerous for you to deal with. You'll have to worry about them in a future sequel. All kinds of interesting mysteries can be there, and some of them will be left on the table for later, or maybe you'll never truly know the answer. The best movies show and don't tell. They don't tell you that somebody is a military veteran. They show them looking wistfully at a picture of their buddy in army uniform. The same should be done with your character backstories in a cinematic game. Reveal little tasty tidbits of character at appropriate scenes, in appropriate moments, or in downtime, and let your fellow players build on that, as well as the director. I think it's great advice in general. They give you some details here about the sort of general setting for these kinds of adventures. As with Call of Cthulhu, basically the 1920s and 30s are the key time for pulp adventure. Likewise here, they focus generally on the era between the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb by Howard Carter in 1922, all the way up until the beginning of World War II. If you are not interested in that period, however, they do mention that you should look at 1999 as a possibility. That was a world that was modern, but not fully globalized. It was before everything was on the internet and before smartphones. There was no social networks. You had Brendan Fraser and The Mummy and stuff like that coming out. It's a modern era that still retains enough nostalgia value that it'll be fun for an adventurous type game. If you want to bring some of these elements into harmony with the original Outgunned, then setting it in 1999 or in the 80s could be a really good choice. Then we got a lovely 2-pager to introduce Section 1, which is our adventures. You can see just been slashed by a dart here as he's running through this trap, but he's very focused, definitely trying to get to the other end of whatever the hell's going to squash him here at the end. Looks like he needs to make it through the darts and run through these closing doors here with spikes on them. So they introduce the adventure sheet, which we've already had a look at. And if you want to be a great adventurer, there are 3 rules they recommend. So, you're looking for a treasure, and that's the most important thing. You need to be able to take risks, and you need a pinch of recklessness. So you should use your re-rolls, take risky actions, just go for it, basically. Make things cinematic and fun. And finally, you should do the right thing. I mean, you might be in a dangerous line of work, and some of you will be scoundrels or thieves or grave robbers, but ultimately you have good hearts, and that's what makes the movie journey in these type of films entertaining. These misfits all gather together, and they come out of it better people with bonds, camaraderie, and maybe even an amazing piece of treasure at the end. And then we get into creating an adventure, which is very much similar to Outgunned Original. You choose a role, you fill in your personal data, your name and age and so forth. You choose a trope, which further modifies your role. You mark the attributes and skill points gained from your role and trope. Then you get your 2 free skill points, which you can put anywhere you like. Then you choose and note 3 feats from your role and your trope. Then you choose your gear, which is given to you by your role. You mark 1 luck, 1 spotlight, and 1 cash. And that 1 cash could be used to get you something additional before you set off. So your personal data is the stuff we saw at the top of the character sheet before. Your background is, could be useful. If you're a former soldier, then maybe that means you might have contacts in the military, for example. Your catchphrase is a clear indication of how you want to portray your adventurer. So it should be something that captures their personality, and that when you throw it into a scene, it's going to have real impact and show people who you are. You can have a flaw. They give an example here of being afraid of spiders, or you could be afraid of snakes, or you could be overbearing or easy to anger or something like that. Something that if you play on, you can also give you some benefit in the game. One of the ways that you can gain luck or even spotlights in Outgunned Adventure is to use your flaw in a scene willingly. You also want to choose your age, young, adult, or old. So if you're young, you only get 2 feats, but you get an additional feat called Too Young to Die, which makes you more resilient. And you start with 2 luck instead of 1. If you're an adult, then you get the defaults of 3 feats and all that stuff from your role and your trope. If you're old, then you get 1 additional feat from the ones available from your role or trope, but you start the game with 2 bullets in your death roulette instead of 1. So you're a little bit more susceptible to death. Then you got your roles. So there are 10 of them: Daredevil, Guardian, Captain, Hunter, Heart, Star, Professor, Technician, Scoundrel, and Smuggler. And when you choose a role, you gain 1 point in an attribute and 1 point each in 10 skills. Then you can choose 2 feats from the list of 6 for the role. It also gives you your starting gear and suggests backgrounds, catchphrases, and flaws. You can also use the roles from the Outgunned core book as well. And then we have a special role, the Fortune Seeker. So this one is simultaneously acting as your role and your trope. You get 2 attribute points and 14 skill points. Then you get 6 skill points to assign freely instead of the usual 2, and you get up to 3 feats from the list offered by your special role. So this is what you want to pick if you want a really exceptional hero, and in particular if you're working with a small group of players or even 1 player, which is very cool. You can also ask your director to substitute your role feats with another feat taken from the Outgunned core book or from another expansion. All feats that require adrenaline to be activated can also be activated using luck, and vice versa. Just a little bit of clarification. I think most people figure that out because they have the same symbol, which is in case they make that clear for you. So the Daredevil. Classic Daredevils in movies include Indiana Jones, Rick O'Connell in The Mummy, Nathan Drake in Uncharted, Lara Croft. So these are adventurers looking for action, or a treasure hunter looking for a thrill. Could be former soldiers, explorers, tomb robbers. They get their attribute point in brawn, skill points in endure, fight, stunt, cool, shoot, survival, flirt, leadership, stealth, and streetwise. They can get a couple of feats from fighter, get down, gunslinger, hardened, that was close, or thrill seeker. They start with a pistol, a revolver, a knife, and a rope. We have the Guardian. Very, very excellent picture here. So some more examples. Of course, I love that they always give examples in the sidebars in the Outgunned games. So Ardith Bay in The Mummy, Dr. Joshua Strongbear Sweet in Atlantis the Lost Empire, Kazim in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, etc. Guardians are strong and resolute adventurers who strive to protect the treasures or their traveling companions. They start with backgrounds as bodyguards, field medics, or from an ancient order. They get attribute points in brawn. They get skill points in endure, fight, force, cool, survival, leadership, heal, know, awareness, and streetwise. Their feats can be from big and strong, bodyguard, explorer, favored weapon, hardened, and physician. And they get a weapon of their choice and one $1 item of choice. Nice flexibility there. Then the Captain. Classic captains include Frank Wolf in Jungle Cruise, Launchpad McQuack in DuckTales, Winston Havelock in The Mummy, Ronaldo in Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, etc. So these are veterans ready to dive back into the action, skilled expedition leaders, fearless aviators, or sailors with years of experience. And they get their attribute point in nerves, get skill points in endure, stunt, drive, shoot, survival, flirt, leadership, fix, awareness, and dexterity. And their feats can include 2 from Fix It, Guide, Pilot, Reassure, Saddle Up, and Sailor. Their gear, they also get a pistol or revolver. They get an old ride, and they get a compass to help them find their way. The Hunter, another great picture here. Lovely 2-barreled shotgun. Classic hunters include Alan Quatermain in The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Dr. Nate Samuels in Beast, Hugh Glass in The Revenant, Katniss Everdeen in The Hunger Games, Aragorn in Lord of the Rings. Lots of good examples there. So they're quiet, watchful, and patient, always one step ahead of their prey, and they all have a deep reverence and fear towards nature and the wild, and never forget their place in the world. The attribute point, again, goes to nerve. nerves. They get skill points in endure, force, cool, shoot, survival, leadership, detect, heal, awareness, and stealth. They can get feats from explorer, favored weapon, guide, hardened, hawkeye, or skulker. They can get one $1 item of choice. They can get a hunting rifle or a hunting bow and a knife. We got the heart. So they're the heart and soul of the group. They're the ones that cheer people up and unite the group. Some play instruments, some prepare good meals, some give advice, some lead by example. They get attribute points in smooth, skill points in endure, stunt, drive, flirt, speech, style, detect, heal, know, and stealth. Feats include 2 from artist, chin up, physician, reassure, silver tongue, and that was close. And for gear, they get one $1 item of their choice and one $2 item of their choice. Very cool. Look at the very cute puffy cat here. Classic hearts, we have Samwise Gamgee in Lord of the Rings, Watson in Sherlock Holmes, of course Will Byers in Stranger Things, who's explicitly called the heart of the party in season 4. And we got the Star, another glorious picture here. The stars are cabaret singers, wealthy patrons of the arts, world-famous actors or actresses, or upper crusters in search of a thrill. Attribute points in smooth, which makes sense. They have skill points in stunt, drive, shoot, flirt, leadership, speech, style, know, dexterity, and stealth. Among their feats, they can choose from artist, heartbreaker, I meant to do that, maverick, money bags, of course, and that was close. For gear, they get elegant clothes and a precious item of choice, like a golden lighter or a piece of jewelry. And good examples here are Willie Scott in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, Loretta Sage in The Lost City, Nicolas Cage in The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, and Ian Malcolm in Jurassic Park. Then we got the Professor, another great picture. He's got all his maps, looking all dorky, but still kind of suave. The classic professors include Milo James Thatch in Atlantis, The Lost Empire, Dr. Henry Jones Sr. in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Evelyn Carnahan in The Mummy, and Alan Grant in Jurassic Park. So they're disheveled researchers who dedicate their entire life to one discovery, a professor with elbow patches, or a young bookworm chasing their dreams. So they get an attribute point in focus to reflect their intellectual capacity, skill points in drive, leadership, speech, style, detect, heal, know, awareness, dexterity, and stealth. From feats, they can choose from archaeology, eye for details, I meant to do that, linguist, specialist, and watch and learn. And for their gear, they get only a diary and pencil. But they do get $1 like everyone else, so they could buy something else. And the technician, I absolutely love this image. He's lighting a bundle of dynamite sticks with a cigar. How cool is that? So classic technicians would include Bradley Poole and National Treasure. So these are demolition experts, radio technicians, a mechanic with years of experience, or a sapper in the army. They get an attribute point in focus as well. Skill points in endure, fight, force, drive, shoot, survival, detect, fix, dexterity, and streetwise. For feats, they can get big and strong, fix-it, pilot, sensible packer, specialist, and trailblazer. They can bring for their gear an old rifle or dynamite, a tool bag, and a knife or a lighter. Then we got the Scoundrel. The only example here you really need is Short Round from Temple of Doom. That gives you all you need to know. And look at this great picture as well. Such a cheeky smirk on his face. Obviously, he's been pickpocketing people all day long. A lovable crook, an urchin who came up on the street, or a gentleman thief. They have their attribute point in crime, of course. Skill points in stunt, drive, flirt, speech, know, detect, fix, dexterity, stealth, and streetwise. Feats they can choose from disguise, quick and nimble, quick fingers, sensible packer, subterfuge, and that was close. Their gear could be a knife, lighter, and one $1 item of choice. We got our smugglers, people like Victor Sullivan in Uncharted, Jonathan Carnahan in The Mummy, Joel Miller in The Last of Us, all this kind of stuff, and Bilbo Baggins in The Hobbit. It's an interesting example. So they're couriers trying to evade the law, archaeologists with a mountain of debts, or an adventurer who fell off the wagon. Attribute point in crime as well. Skill points in stunt, cool, drive, shoot, survival, leadership, detect, know, stealth, and streetwise. They can choose 2 feats from archaeology, estimate, lockpicker, maverick, quick fingers, and subterfuge. For gear, they get a pistol or revolver, a rope, and a lockpicking set. Very nice. Then we have our special role, the Fortune Seeker, who gets the special adventure font for that. They are the be-all and end-all of an adventurer. They have a strong personal tie with the story or the treasure, and often some unfinished business with the rival, too. They're gifted, trained, and blessed by luck. They have everything it takes to find the treasure before it falls into the wrong hands. So you can see they've got much more going on here. So they get attribute points in brawn and nerves, skill points in fight, stunt, cool, drive, shoot, survival, flirt, leadership, speech, detect, know, awareness, dexterity, and stealth. They can choose from 3 feats from this long list: archaeology, disguise, explorer, eye for details, fast reflexes, favored weapon, gunslinger, hardened, money bag, saddle up, that was close, and thrill seeker. They get 2 pistols or 2 revolvers, a compass, and an item of their choice. And they mention here again the rules for the special roles. Then we get into our tropes. There's a whole bunch of these, so we won't go too much into detail. Basically, you add this to your role, gives you a further bit of detail about who your character is going to be. And when you choose your trope, you gain 1 point in an attribute and 1 point each in 6 skills. Then you choose 1 feat from the list of 4 for the trope. So if I were to pick an action archaeologist, I want to be more indie-like, I could add my attribute point in brawn or focus. I could choose 1 feat from archaeology, eye for details, fast reflexes, or thrill seeker, and then I put 1 point in 6 skills from fight, stunt, shoot, speech, detect, know, dexterity, or stealth. And that's the way all of these work. We've got adventuring author, born rebel, cold and distant, cowardly lion, detestable bastard, smoother crime for that one, the dreamer, the flying steamroller, the gentle giant, and then we've got the indispensable rogue, the parental figure, proper gentleman or lady with smoother focus, that works, reluctant hero, the salty dog, been at sea for perhaps too long, wild at heart. And then we get into our attributes and skills, which they just talk about a little bit more what they mean. So we've got 5 attributes and 20 skills altogether. So under each attribute are 4 skills. These are pretty obvious. I think brawn is obviously physical effort. Nerves is requiring reflexes and steady hands. Smooth is interacting with others or manipulation. Focus is concentration, noticing details, recall memories and knowledge. Crime is when you're acting in secret or to notice incoming threats. And then the skills beneath that are even more detailed and pretty clear to understand. Then we have 42 feats in this game, which I obviously won't go into in detail. It's more fun to discover yourselves. There's lots of different options here. Some of them have a lightning symbol besides their name, and that means that they can be activated by spending luck or adrenaline if you're mixing in with Outgunned Original. Some feats cost a quick action to activate if you're using them in combat. Some you need to give up a full turn. So we'll pick a couple of examples. So Bodyguard is one which you need to spend 1 luck to activate. You step in at the last second to help your friend, disregarding your own safety and health. So after another adventure fails a roll, you suffer the consequences of their failure. So for example, if they should lose grit or suffer a condition, you do instead. Keep them in the battle and maybe you act as the tank. Disguise underneath, which also costs a luck to activate, but here it costs a full turn. So in the bag you see an officer's uniform and it's in your size. So the idea is that you spend a turn, you find, steal, or craft perfect disguise for yourself and or one other adventurer without rolling the dice. Very handy. And we'll find a quick action one. Here's one, eye for details. You notice or remember details that elude everyone else. You can spend a quick action to either come up with a detail that could prove helpful in a difficult situation, for example, a loophole or a hidden passage, or ask the director for a clue or suggestion. And then we got a whole bunch of these, many of which are free rerolls. So those are rerolls where you get to reroll your dice, but you keep your previous successes, even if your second roll is worse. And we'll see more about that later. And a lot of these will do that, but we do have stuff like money bags, which is a really good one. You start the game with 4 cash instead of 1, and you can spend a full turn and spend 1 luck to find a contact, passage somewhere, an invite to an event, or another service thanks to your huge wealth or fame. How handy is that? Quick Fingers is great if you want to snatch something with sleight of hand. Yeah, there's a lot of great options here for feats that give you that feeling of, you've got something special to offer the team. Then you've got your resources. So your grit is your ability to shake off wounds and stress. So every adventurer has 12 empty boxes for grit. And every time you lose some grit, you fill in some of those boxes. And then there's the You Look section on the character sheet, which we saw. And that keeps track of your conditions, which are the consequences of bad injuries, exhaustion, and other things. Then we've got your luck. So you begin the game with 1 luck. You can always spend luck to get +1 for a roll you deem important, or use it to activate your feats, as we saw. Spotlights are even more precious. You begin the game with 1. Spend it to gain a success without rolling dice, to remove a condition, or to save one of your friends when they're about to meet their bitter end. Then we have your Death Roulette, another resource. So it can contain up to 6 lethal bullets. You begin the game with 1 and gain another whenever you take a spin on the Death Roulette to save your bacon. The more bullets there are in your cylinder, the harder it will be for you to keep avoiding dramatic departure from the scene. Finally, you've got your cash and gear. So cash and gear discussed in section 4 in more detail. Basically, spend cash, get gear. Then we have the basics of the game. So this stuff is really going to be pretty much identical to what we saw in Outgunned, the original. The director rolls very, very infrequently in this game. There are 2 types of rolls for players. The action roll, you're taking an action in combat, you describe what you're going to do, and you roll the dice. And you will always put together a dice pool with an attribute and a skill. And then luck, conditions, and gear can modify your chances of success. Whenever you get a modifier that says +1 or -1, for example, that will be number of dice. Because, again, we don't care about the numbers on the dice, we just care about their matching or not. Reaction rolls when something is happening to you, and you pick an attribute and skill that you must use to deal with the situation, and the director will pick those. So they give an example: cling to a tree branch, a pesky monkey starts walking on your face. So make a reaction roll in nerves plus endure to keep hanging on. And they remind you that you really should only roll when something's at stake, or if something could go wrong. You're a skilled adventurer. You need to do something difficult, but you've got all the time in the world and nobody's on your back, then just do it. But if you're being chased by Nazi occultists, then you might need to make some rolls. And no matter what happens with your modifiers and everything, you can never roll less than 2 or more than 9 dice. Then you got your roll difficulties, which we talked about before: basic, critical, extreme, and impossible. And they give you a nice illustration here. Basic stuff is really easy. Critical is more difficult. Here's he's fixing an airplane engine. Extreme, here he's trying to escape a leopard while hanging from a tiny branch. And impossible is, making a flying leap over this huge tower, and there's hazards everywhere and skulls stuck to spears. And lovely illustration of the difficulty scaling. And you got double difficulties as well, so you can have 2 basic, 2 critical, or 2 extreme. But 2 extreme is pretty ridiculous. You need a dice pool of at least 8 to even attempt that. Too basic or too critical can happen relatively often. Give some tips here for how to set difficulties. Extreme difficulty should be reserved for truly demanding rolls. 2 criticals are a happy medium between critical and extreme, so they recommend that when you're not entirely sure that extreme is justified. Impossible is only justified when adventurers have gotten themselves into deep shit, basically. So if they're really on the edge of extreme stupidity, then make it impossible. Jackpot is something that should only come up as incredibly random lucky thing. What they do have, which is lovely, again, is the success rates. So size of your dice pool and the success rates for the different types of successes all the way up to impossible. And you can see obviously the increases along the way, but then they include the results for rerolls and how likely they are to give you success. And you can see that for impossible with 9 dice, the basic chance is 5%. If you reroll, it's 57. So rerolls should be used a lot. And here they show you the 5 categories of success again in terms of dice, basic, critical, extreme, impossible, and jackpot. And if you get more successes than you need, then you can use those to take extra actions. If you get a jackpot, you become the director for the turn. Freely describe how your sensational actions take care of the situation and lead you to success. It's your turn in the spotlight. Bigger successes are worth 3 of the success level below them, which we talked about before. Now, rerolls are a key to this system. Drastically increase your chances of success, but they do have a risk. So if you roll and you get lesser success than you need, you can re-roll, take all dice that weren't part of a combination already, and roll them again. And if your result ends up being better than the first, congratulations. If it's not, then you lose one of your previously scored successes, and you choose which of those successes you lose. So basically, if you get a basic, for example, out of a pool of 5, and you want to get a critical, you could leave the 2 basics, roll the other 3 dice again. If you get another die that matches, you get a critical, Bob's your uncle. If you don't get any matches, then you lose the basic success and you have nothing, so you fail to roll. So that's the risk. However, free rerolls that you get from feats are different. You never lose your initial success, so you always want to reroll if you got a free reroll. And you can make a free reroll even if you didn't get any successes on your first roll. A regular reroll, you need to get at least a basic to be able to do it. There's rarely a reason not to use a free reroll unless your initial roll is just perfect. All in is your desperate move that is very risky, but sometimes needed. So if you do a reroll or a free reroll, and even if you get a better result, you can still choose to go all in. So once more, you roll all dice that weren't part of a success. If you get a better result, then good for you. If not, you lose all previous successes. So that's why it's called going all in. And then they just remind you that you should do rerolls pretty frequently. If by the end of a session you notice you haven't rerolled at least half your rolls, you might be playing too safe. But that's not true about going all in. That's for desperate situations only and should be used sparingly. Then we have a nice example to play here with how these different successes and rerolls work. And then extra action. So if you get an extra basic success, you can get an extra quick action in combat, like grab or throw an item, reload a weapon, get partial cover, something quick and easy. An extra critical success gives you a full action. You can break through a door, get behind total cover, find a clue, or do something that requires moderate effort. An extra extreme success gives you a cool action. Jump out of a crumbling temple without getting squashed, shoot at a tiny target while running, jam the mechanism of a trap that's flooding the room, do something unbelievably difficult. How cool is that? And then you talk about the 2 kinds of cover. Partial cover gives you +1 to reaction rolls, so extra protection, but -1 to your action rolls, so it's harder to hit your targets out of partial cover. Total cover, you get automatic success to reaction rolls. You're completely covered from attacks. You get -3 to your action rolls. And you can also use quick or full actions to push one of your friends behind partial or total cover. And you can even use a cool action to reach cover with another adventurer if you get an extra extreme success. Now, failure, and they make the point here very clearly, even more so than the original Outgunned, failure doesn't exist in the traditional sense in this game. Basically, it's always failing forward. So you're rolling with the punches, you get a partial success with some unfortunate consequences. You might have to pay a price, so you might lose gear or get a condition, but you still kind of get what you need. You might not get the success you wanted, but you have to take the hard road, so you might get a different hint or a clue that takes you in a different way, to a different path. Same destination, but you'll have to go a different way around because of your failure. Or you could end up in a dramatic situation and be forced to make a dangerous roll or face an enemy or some other kind of danger. If you have a smaller success, you can try to mitigate the consequences of your failure. And if you're facing a dangerous roll or combat, then you can spend smaller successes to control the amount of grit damage that you suffer. Then we got your luck. So luck can give you a couple different advantages. You can spend 1 luck to get +1 to an action or reaction roll. You can spend it to activate feats, or you can spend 6 luck to immediately gain a spotlight. And they give you some nice tips on giving out luck as a director. Adventurers begin the game with 1 luck and automatically gain 2 when they fill in the hot box on the grit track, the last box. And additionally, they should be awarded 1 luck whenever they get any of these different things, like a far greater success than they needed, anticipating a trap or solving a complex puzzle, learning something new, respecting other cultures against their own interests. So basically, luck you should be giving out quite often, and the director should be giving out a handful of luck every session. Shouldn't be too stingy. Spotlights are different, though. These are when you get to do something really epic, so you can get an automatic extreme success instead of rolling the dice. You can save a friend who lost the death roulette, so they still add another bullet to their death roulette. You can remove a condition of any kind, including broken, which gives you -1 to all rolls. You can save your ride when it's about to be destroyed, or you can do whatever you want if you consult with the director and they agree. After you lose a spotlight, as I said, you flip a coin. If the result is tails, you immediately regain the spotlight. I think I said heads before, so it's tails. The difference is when you save the life of a friend, then if the result is tails, then they gain 1 spotlight instead of you. You can gain spotlights with genius, crazy, or mind-blowing moves. For example, if you use your catchphrase in a cool way, or if you call your own flaw into play in an interesting way. And basically, whenever 1 luck would be too small of a reward, you should consider giving out a spotlight. And don't forget that you can spend 6 luck to get a spotlight whenever you want, so that's important too. Then we have help and hindrance. So some pieces of gear or secondary characters can help you out with certain things. So they can give you a +1 to an action or reaction roll. They can give you an automatic success. So like somebody boosts you over a wall, you don't need to roll anymore to do that. You can just do it. Or they can gain you the prerequisite you need to make a roll. So they give the example of having a grappling hook to help you climb a smooth wall of ice that would be otherwise impossible. Hindrance is the exact opposite of this. So bulky or bad gear, supporting characters who need your help or work against you, or negative circumstances can give you hindrance. So you can suffer a -1 to an action or reaction roll, get an automatic failure without rolling the dice, or you might require help to even attempt the roll that you need because you don't have the right gear or somebody else has taken it or whatever. Then we get into section 3, dangers and enemies. And we got a bit of our GM screen picture. It's very cool. Now, dangerous rolls. These are a key part of the system, and we know these again from Outgunned Original. If you fail a dangerous roll, you don't get the normal consequences for a failure. You lose a set amount of grit, depending on the difficulty. So if you get a failure on a basic dangerous roll, you lose 1 grit, critical, 3 grit, extreme, 9 grit, impossible, all grit. And once all the boxes are full, then obviously that's a big deal. You need to worry about your death roulette situation. They put a skull from now on to represent a dangerous roll. They always write it as roll and then the skull, so my mind reads it roll skull. So I may end up saying that a few times. Then we have some details about grit. So whenever you fail a roll skull, you fill in a set number of boxes and stand back up after your failure. Filling in grit boxes only represents how many times your determination has managed to save your life. So grit is not like meat points. It's not direct damage to the body necessarily. It's kind of your willingness to go on and your capability to push through a bad situation. If you do a roll skull and fail to score the success you need, you can use any smaller successes to do damage control. So for every basic success, you can avoid 1 grit. For criticals, you get 3 grit. Extremes, you could get rid of 9 grit, for example. And it talks about your 2 special boxes, which we know about already. The bad box, in which give you condition, and the hot box gives you 2 luck. Lose all your grit. You have to spin on the death roulette. See what happens. You got 3 ways to recover your grit. You can sleep on it. So if you get to camp and fall asleep under the stars, you recover your grit. You can catch a break. So if you face the long string of dangers, the director might give you a moment to take a breath and you can recover your grit. And after the end of a gaming session, you all get your grit recovered as well. And we have a game example of dangerous rolls, or roll skulls, as I like to call them. Piling up problems. This is an interesting one. So this is when you use multiple difficulties. So they give an example of, you're piloting a plane, one engine is failing, and you ended up in the middle of a blizzard, plummeting down a waterfall and getting shot at. So these are cases where you need to tack on additional difficulties to the base difficulty, and that represents a more complex action. So for example, you could have your critical plus basic, or basic plus extreme, and so on. And then you just have to do 1 roll to resolve both parts of that complex action, which is really convenient and clever. One of the many clever things about this system, quite honestly. And rolls with multiple difficulties, they basically let you resolve complex situations in 1 roll of the dice to raise the stakes of an action as well. If you think something should be a little bit more difficult because they're trying to do thing X but also being shot at, for example. Consequences. So there are 2 separate consequences that you can suffer with when you have a multiple difficulty roll. If you don't score any of the successes, you failed across the board and you must face every consequence. But if you score one of the successes, you failed only one part. So you didn't fail completely. And if there was more than one consequence, you managed to reach at least one of your goals. That's pretty cool. Then we have the you look stuff. So this is your conditions. You got 5 core conditions. They will happen as a consequence of failure. So for example, if you're trying to pass off as an enemy soldier, you're wearing the uniform, but you feel like people are noticing it's too tight, then you might look nervous and you tick that box for conditions. If you feel in the bad box, then you must get assigned a relevant condition. And if you failed real bad, then the director could decide you also suffer a condition. Removing conditions are basically only possible when you're at camp, or if you use a spotlight to remove a condition, and you can remove up to 2 conditions per day. If you fail an attempt, you cannot try to remove the same condition until another day has passed. And we got your core condition. So tired, you don't have any penalties, but it just pushes you one closer to when you get to your fourth condition, which gives you broken. Hurt gives you -1 to brawn. Nervous, -1 to nerves. Fool, -1 to smooth. Distracted, -1 to focus. Scared, -1 to crime. Broken, -1 to all rolls. You can remove that condition only by spending a couple of days in a hospital or at camp. A friend can use one of their actions to treat your wounds with extreme action roll in focus plus heal. So it's tough to recover from broken unless you've got a spotlight, of course. Then you've got uncommon conditions. These are pretty cool. So I mentioned relaxed before. This is one that you can get during a camp scene. So basically you can have an action that you take which relaxes everybody, and then you have a buffer condition where instead of gaining your first condition, remove the relaxed condition. So the director can also require you to remove relaxed when enough time has elapsed between two scenes or shots. Then you have poisoned. At the beginning of each of your turns, you flip a coin. If you get heads, you lose 1 grit. If you lost all grit because of this condition, you get broken as a condition instead of doing the death roulette as normal. You can remove this with antidotes, with focus plus heal, at critical difficulty in camp, as long as you have the necessary tools. In some cases, the director could decide that the antidote requires an extremely rare ingredient, so then you have to go on another sub-quest. Stunned means you can't spend luck to gain +1 or activate your feats. It's pretty rough. You can remove the condition while at camp, or by using one of your actions to do nothing at all and allowing your senses to settle down. So typically get this from a deafening noise or a blinding light or something like that. Frozen gives you -1 to all rolls that require precision and steady hands. You can remove it by using an action at camp to get warm, by using a nice fire or heavy blankets. Weak is a tough one too. It means you can't make your free rerolls, so a lot of your feats might be useless. That's pretty tough. And you'll see some of the supernatural enemies can make you do that with sorcery and stuff, which is real mean. You can remove the condition with a day of complete rest and a nice warm meal, or your friends can cook you something with a critical action roll smooth plus heal. You can cook for yourself, but you'll have a -1 because you're weak. Then the end of an adventurer. So what happens when you fail your death roulette? Well, you keep on filling up these spots, and hopefully you roll above however many spots in your death roulette are full. Roll greater than the number of spots that are full, then you had a brush with death. Add another bullet to your cylinder to describe how you managed to cheat death, and keep on going. If the roll is equal to the number of lethal bullets or lower, you'll be left for dead unless somebody saves you with a spotlight. You always start with 1 bullet in the chamber, so if you roll a 1 on the bullet die, first time you get to death roulette, then you'll still die, even though it's your first running out of grit. But nobody really dies unless you decide you want to, so it's more like taking a dramatic bow and leaving everybody heartbroken. If you are left for dead, you can always return later on, and you get a scar experience from whatever preposterous way you managed to escape and survive and get better and find your way back to the group. The best moments for an adventure to return to the scene are during a point of no return or a moment of truth, which is part of the cinematic campaign structure for Outgunned Adventure. Then we got some basic enemies here. So an enemy is an abstract entity that just represents a bunch of opponents. They will have a grit track, as we see here. They have an attack difficulty and a defense difficulty. An enemy is a source of dangerous rolls, and you use those stats to determine the difficulty of those rolls. And each abstract entity that you're fighting represents several people, a bunch of security guards, drunken bruisers, a military squad. I mean, it's sort of abstracting a large fight scene into a single set of basic action reaction rolls. That's one of the clever things about the system. Action, because of this, is fast and furious. There's still tactical decisions to be made, but basically you don't spend a lot of time with maps and working out positions and a million different feats and things. You know what you're set out to do. You know what your character's good at. You help out your friends. You pass successes around. You overcome the challenge, and you move on. And in this game especially, the combat system has been smoothed out even more so that you don't need to have as much detail in the enemies except for the big rivals and supernatural enemies, which get their own dedicated chapter, of course. So the enemy grit, of course, is from 3 to 12 for them. As a general rule, enemies with basic or critical defense should have between 3 and 6 grit boxes. And when the grit boxes are full, the enemy is defeated or they have to flee. The enemy defense represents the difficulty of action rolls that we need to land blows as adventurers, right? For example, for the security guards, it's critical, so you need to go score critical or better on your action roll to do damage to them. In contrast to that, the attack roll is the difficulty that you need to succeed at to avoid their attacks. So the military squad has 2 critical on their attack, which means very hard to defend against. Then we have the enemy attack and the different possibilities for that here. And then they talk about advanced enemies, which have more complex actions. You can either get those from the Outgunned core book as well as the supernatural threats in the Outgunned Adventure book itself. So they talk about how to face enemies. There's only a very simple initiative rule, so the first to strike is the first to strike. So if you attack first, then you start with an action turn. Get caught by surprise, then combat will begin with a reaction turn. Otherwise, if you're not sure, you can flip a coin to decide. Action turns are when you are taking actions as adventurers, and you can take any action you want and make the relevant action rolls. You have the right to make a free quick action as well, which is things like reload a gun or get behind partial cover or take out an item. Reaction turns is when you defend yourselves, and it's a roll skull situation. So if you fail, you're going to lose grit because the enemies are attacking you. Winning a combat is when you fill in the last grit box for an enemy. The enemy is knocked out or forced to flee. If the adventurers are all actively participating in a combat scene and lose their grit, then they were defeated. So that means the enemy surrounds and captures them, or they're pushed into a corner and forced to either negotiate or attempt a desperate escape. So again, it's not failure in the true sense. There's still a way out. It's just going to be a hell of a lot harder for you. Then they talk about action turns during combat and the basics of how that works. The same with reaction rolls, and they give you the kind of set basic rolls that you'll need to know, which the director should know really. So if the enemies attack you with fists and bats, then you want to roll brawn plus fight in reaction. If they shoot at you, it'll be brawn plus stunt, trying to sort of dodge out of the way. If they try to grapple or choke you, brawn plus endure. Push you to the ground, brawn plus force. If they throw tables and chairs at you, nerves plus stealth. Try to surround you, nerves plus awareness. And as a general rule, all adventurers taking part in combat should make the same reaction roll. Potentially, if the adventurers scouted themselves all about the place, then the director could decide to have different reaction rolls depending on where you are and what you're doing, but that can get complicated. They talk about managing that here. And during combat, you can get extra successes in your reaction turn to take extra actions. You can counterattack, so if you get an extra success on your reaction roll equal to the enemy defense, you can use it to counterattack. When you counter, the enemy loses 1 grit as they would when you attack. Then you can also protect. So if you score an extra success equal to the enemy attack, you can also use it to protect a friend who failed their roll. But you cannot use lower successes for damage control for somebody else. They can only be used on damage control for yourself. I've got a nice example scene with combat. And then we talk about assists. So it's a new tool. It allows you to share some of your successes with others. I was doing this with Outgunned Original anyway, basically. So I'm glad that this is now kind of official. You describe as much as possible which actions you're taking to create an opportunity for your allies. So you try to distract them, get them to chase you, or create a diversion or whatever. And then basically you leave a success out on the table after your roll, and another adventurer can take advantage of it to improve their next roll. If you score an extra success lower than what you need to do additional damage, then the director could also allow you to spend it to make an assist, which would help somebody else. And they talk about using assists. They give an example here of somebody getting 2 basic successes and they need a critical, but they get an assist basic from somebody else, which brings them 3 basics, which is the same as 1 critical, and that means they can then do damage. And assisting has 3 main goals, so it encourages team play and sharing the narrative and the spotlight. It gives weight to smaller or extra successes, so that extra basic or critical doesn't just fade into the background. It's something you can use for further benefit. It adds a bit more strategy as well. So I think this is a fantastic rule. It's basically, like I said, a variant of what I was doing anyway in the original game, so I'm really glad that they've kind of codified it and given it some extra features that I didn't think of as well. And then we got our extended roles. So these are activities that last more than a single action, and there are different ways to do this. So they give an example here of pushing a boulder. You might need to get a certain number of successes of a certain level that you have to collect to move the boulder out of the way. Time success threshold might be you have a certain number of turns to make your attempt. You need to get a certain number of successes before those turns run out in order to succeed. And they talk about a time trap in that context. Then we have cumulative successes, so you want to accumulate a bunch of successes to get better results on an outcome. So if you're trying to build or repair something, that's quite useful. Consecutive successes, so you might need to pass 2 consecutive rolls to succeed, and this is for like small chase scenes and stuff like that. Best 3 out of 5 would mean that you need the adventurers to score 2 successes out of 3 rolls or 3 successes out of 5 rolls. They could have different difficulties if necessary, and this is perfect for kind of sport competitions or point-based competitions or arm wrestling or stuff like that. Then you have the failure threshold, where you only have a certain number of failures you can roll before you all get screwed. So the example here is, if you're walking out on an unstable rope bridge, then a certain number of breakages are allowed, but at a certain point the bridge will just fall out and you'll have to fall into the ravine. Then we have opposed roles. There are 3 types: adventurer versus director. It's the most common type. The director can roll any number of dice they choose, usually 5, 6, or sometimes 7, depending on the opponent's strength. And it should be for a dramatic moment. Like if the adventurer is facing off directly against an opponent or standing against a force of nature, you would do this kind of opposed roll. Then you have adventurer versus adventurer. This is only something that you want to really see to make a plot milestone even more interesting, and not something to resolve squabbles between adventurers or players. Finally, there's adventurer versus fortune, which is an interesting one. So this is when the adventurer is doing something unexpected or flat out crazy. You should first of all ask who among the other players will play the role of fortune and roll against you. So you can can act as you wish, choosing the attributes and skill you feel are best for the role. And regardless of your choice, Fortune will roll the same number of dice and enjoy the same advantages, including any free rerolls you have. So the playing field is always level. In the other circumstances, the director doesn't get free rerolls or anything like that, but in Adventure vs. Fortune, they get the exact same rolling privileges that you have. So that's pretty interesting. Then they talk about how to make an opposed roll. So you roll your pool of dice. You can only spend 1 luck per turn and cannot use the spotlight to succeed. Then you read the results. The contender with the worst result must re-roll first if they can. And if they manage to turn the tables, the other contender also can re-roll to get an even better result. And then you can carry on to all in if you still don't have a decision at that point. So whoever gets the best combination of successes has won the challenge. Then you can have extended exposed rolls as well. They should be used sparingly, but can be very exciting when placed at just the right moment. Then we have our guns and gear. Look at all this cool stuff we got. This chapter is all about gear, weapons, gear and weapon feats, your bag and your backpack, key items, and what you do with your cash. Generally, helpful items give you +1 to a roll, while hindrance will give you -1. You can get hindrance from things like bulky items that might reduce your rolls. So when you need to use brawn, the bulky feat could cause you a hindrance of -1. So you will get gear at the start from your roll. Then if you've got some cash, you can use that to buy new stuff. You can obtain new gear by borrowing it from your enemies, or by spending some of your cash. You can lose gear as a result of your failures, or you can choose to sacrifice it to gain +1 to a roll that you think is very important. But you can never sacrifice a key item in that way. And they also talk about using everyday objects sometimes. If you pick a clever way to use an everyday object, that could give you help in certain circumstances. Then weapons. So ranged weapons or firearms allow you to shoot bullets and arrows at your enemies. Most of them rely on mags, which you can empty to gain +1 to a roll, or to lay down covering fire. All firearms that require 2 hands to be operated, so like a long gun, like a rifle or a shotgun, they give you +1 to action rolls made to shoot, but that doesn't apply to double-wielding handguns. Melee weapons don't offer much in the way of advantages, unless you're trained in how to use them and can rely on the favorite weapon feat. And you can also get a hindrance if you're fighting in melee and you don't have a weapon and you're fighting against people with swords or beasts with claws and fangs. Now, for adventure, you don't need to keep track of every single bullet, you just keep track of mags. Each weapon can carry up to 3 magazines +1 in the weapon, and you note those by filling in the bullets you see on the weapons and gear box. There are only 4 ways to empty a mag, so if you fail to roll to shoot, you lose a mag. If you voluntarily empty a mag, you can get +1 to the roll to go full auto, and if you're holding 2 guns, you can even go full auto simultaneously with both and get +2 for your roll. Or you can shoot in your enemy's general direction for covering fire, so your friends gain +1 to their next reaction roll. You use your full turn and skip your action roll when you do covering fire. Finally, bad luck. So as a consequence of a failure, the director might state that 1 or more of your mags were lost or taken away or became unusable in some other way. And to reload a weapon, you'll need to use a quick action. If you run out of mags, you must get more either by paying cash or stealing them from defeated enemies. And to keep things simple, weapons are divided into types and each type shares a mag. You can't reload an assault rifle with a pistol mag, but you can use a pistol mag to reload any handgun. So that just keeps things easier. And then we have a nice list of items and what they do. So for example, elegant clothes grant help for stylish occasions but are a hindrance to movement. Knives give you sharp feet. Tool bags give you help to repair objects or rides. Musical instruments let you play or perform. Pistols allow you to shoot. Old rifles have slow reload, but you shoot with +1. Shotguns have impact, slow reload, so it takes full turn to reload, and you always shoot with a +1. Machine guns give you rapid fire, and you can shoot with +1. Bows are silent and single shot. You can shoot arrows. Dynamite gives you boom feats and a single shot. So just very straightforward little descriptions, but very much distinguishes these items from each other in a handy way. Weapon and gear feats, there's only a few, and they're all you need to know, really. Accurate, you can spend 1 turn to take aim and get +1 to your roll. Single shot means you don't use a mag, but you have single munitions. Things like arrows, Silent means the weapon is quiet, so you don't alert the enemy and don't reveal your position when you use it. Rapid fire means you get +1 on your reaction roll for yourself when you do covering fire, not just your friends. Slow reroll means you need a full action instead of a quick action to reload. Uncommon means that the weapon or gear is hard to find, so it could be more expensive or you gotta find it or craft it in some particular way. Impact means you get help to crash through doors and objects and to hurl enemies away from you. Melee weapons, if you're not trained with them, do nothing, but if you are, they do special stuff if you have the favored weapon feat. Bulky means that it gives you a hindrance when you need to move quickly, climb, or swim. Fixed mean the weapon is stuck on the ground or on a ride. Can't be moved or carried, but they have no mags and you just keep shooting until they're destroyed. Sharp means the weapon grants help to cut ropes, carve wooden objects, and to cut through vegetation. Finally, boom means the weapon has powerful explosive blasts and grants help to crash through obstacles, gates, rides, or walls. Enemies who sustain a hit from a weapon with this feat always lose 1 additional grit, but adventurers nearby will also run the risk of becoming hurt. And they mention as well, if you want a bit more to your tactical combat, then grab yourself the Outgunned core book. They also point out that if you want to underline or give a scene more gravitas, then you can switch to a model of counting bullets rather than just mags. They don't have that in the basic rules. You can do that if you want the adventurers to really feel the impact of every shot, which I think is pretty cool. Then you have your bag and your backpack. So your items can be on you, but you can only have up to 3 weapons on you, and only one of those can be bulky. Bags can only hold items of smaller size. These are things like sacks, purses, travel trunks, and briefcases. And then backpacks, these are more bulky. So you can have up to 3 additional weapons. Only one of those can be bulky though. An empty backpack is no big deal, but a full backpack can always become a hindrance if the director feels like it would be. Getting an item out of or into your backpack requires a full turn or an extra full action, whereas getting something out of a small bag requires a quick action. And at the beginning of the game, when you're doing character creation, you decide whether to have a bag, a backpack, or both. But you can never have more than one of each at the same time. If you lose one, it could be because you failed desperately badly or your enemies took it from you. You can also choose to sacrifice your bag or backpack to gain +1 to a pivotal roll. So for example, if you're hanging on to something desperately, trying not to fall to a bunch of wolves, you could drop your bag to get a +1 to the roll to pull yourself up, which would make sense narratively. Then we have the key items. These are crucial things that you need to find, and the key aspect of the key is that you can never lose it because you failed to roll. When you would lose it as a result of a bad consequence, you'll lose a grit instead. You get the key either at the beginning of the adventure, you find it in a temple filled with traps of all kinds, or you could grab it from the rival in your adventure, provided you manage to outsmart, defeat, or rob them. When you lose it, it would be only when you're captured or left for dead. It could be taken from you by the rival or their right-hand man or woman. If the heat rises, the director could spend a heat point to try and take it away from you. Or if you reach the point of no return, or sometimes during the moment of truth, you might lose the key. Again, those are parts of the campaign structure. Then we have some examples of cool items, which I'll try not to spoil here, but cool stuff like Serpent Dagger, the Seal of Anubis. Then we have cash, so it's a abstract kind of representation for how expensive things are. Basic stuff like a pistol, toolbox, $1. $2 would be like a saxophone, a nice hunting rifle, passage through a border. $3 is for luxury gear, rare items, or specific requests, like a Zeppelin transport or machine guns, stuff like that. Earning cash can happen by selling some of your stuff, but basically if you sell your stuff, you will only get 1/3 of the original price. Gear and services that cost more than $3 can't be bought, so you have to take on side assignments to do that. And they also mention that when you go into foreign countries with different currency, make sure you blow your cash before you go, because your money is no good over there, so you'll have to find money some other way. Temples and traps. A very cool image here. We got bats flying. There's a boulder coming. She's running away with the key item. Yeah, very Indiana Jonesy. So in adventure context, they talk about the temple, but it could really be almost anything. The concept of any abandoned, hidden, or forgotten structure that by nature or design is nearly impossible to locate and reach. It'll typically have a key or a treasure, which are protected by traps, enigmas, and dangers of all kinds. Could be pyramids, abandoned castles, a Buddhist temple in Nepal, ancient catacombs in Paris, all sorts of stuff. Who built the temple? Was it the Aztecs for sacrifices? Was it the Egyptians for a pharaoh? The Nazis built something for occult experiments? What was it? And then when do you want to get the most out of these in your adventure? It could be in the thick of the action at the beginning, could be halfway through where you need to find a precious key or an artifact that you need to set off in search of the true treasure at the end of the story. Or it could be at the end where you have a legendary temple and everything goes crazy and you got to fight your big rival and get the big treasure. Different kinds of traps. So whenever a trap goes off, it either directly or indirectly causes reaction roll skulls. As a consequence, when you find yourself in the path of a trap, you'll lose some grit and then be on your merry way. Some traps, however, would cause additional complications. So they could give you conditions, take away your equipment or gear, sometimes even your whole bag or backpack. If you realize a trap is probably in front of you, you can try to bypass it. So you might just be careful about how you move, stepping on certain tiles and not others, or not pulling the wrong lever. Other times you might need to make some kind of action roll. You can also disarm traps if you manage to spot their mechanism with an action roll in crime plus fix or some other similar roll. And then we have 3 main kinds of traps. So trigger traps, they're activated as a moment's notice. So you touch the wrong thing, step in front of a light beam or whatever. They're instantaneous and are resolved with a single reaction roll skull, which could target only the adventurer who triggered the trap or could target all nearby adventurers. Deterrent traps are not directly trying to harm you. They just want to make your life harder. Could be, the classic swinging blades on a thin passageway. Deadly traps, so they set off a slow chain reaction like flooding your room with seawater, closing the doors, or setting off a huge rolling boulder after you, or, slowly lowering the ceiling to squash you, or, squeezing in spikes from each side of the room. And then you'll have an extended roll or run scene until you find a way to disarm or outrun the trap. Traps are a great way to kind of keep your adventurers on their toes, and they're a staple of the genre, but they're also an excellent way to make adventurers slow down their exploration, make sure they take their time, enjoy the scenery, and, take away some items here and there, basically. Give them some attrition so that they will have further challenge as the adventure goes forward. Then we have some classic trigger traps, so wall darts, big cleaver blades, trap doors opening, mechanical statues that activate and damage you, snakes shooting out of the wall, electric shocks. Classic deterrent traps, we've got our swinging blade tunnel, we've got rapidly closing doors, slippery pathway, so maybe some stairs suddenly flatten out and make you slide down, rotating bridges, scorpions everywhere, revolving walls. Classic deadly traps could be flooding rooms, a rolling boulder, and you're going to have an example of a run that you need to deal with, but there's more on that later. And in case of failure, you lose grit and suffer the distracted, hurt, or tired conditions. The sea of fire, so the floor is lava. We have collapsing floors. Then we get into runs, so that kind of is what we're dealing with the deadly traps. So a run scene is not a competition or a chase, it's a race for survival. So you have several consecutive reaction turns, and all rolls are dangerous rolls or roll skulls. There are usually 3 or 5 consecutive turns depending on how complex the scene is. And so basically, if you manage to survive until the end of the run, then you're victorious. Alternatively, you can try to find a way to escape the run ahead of time, like finding a hidey hole or, some method to stop the hazard. If you lose all your grit before the end of the run, you won't be dead, but you'll end up trapped in the rubble or sealed in a crypt or something like that. During a cinematic campaign, losing a run could also cause the heat to rise. Basically, runs, as mentioned, are a series of consecutive reaction turns, and here's a list of kind of examples. So each turn of the 3 or 5 turns or so, the director will describe what the adventurers are involved in and ask them to make a reaction roll skull. The huge boulder would be brawn plus stunt, corridor getting smaller, maybe crime plus stealth, tunnel splitting in 2, you need to choose quickly, nerves plus cool, stuff like that. Most reactions will have critical or 2 critical difficulty, depending on the circumstances, or if you find some sort of hidden way to give yourself some breathing room, then they could reduce the difficulty. Usually the director will determine what reaction rolls you need to make, but they can also allow the adventurers to react freely using the characteristics that are most appropriate to them if they choose. After the first turn of a run, the adventurer can start to fall behind. If you don't even get at least a basic success, then you start falling behind the others, and you suffer a hindrance on your next roll. And if nobody comes to help you, you also get broken. You can also find an opening. So if you lose no grit at all, you're doing great, and you get a precious opportunity. So you can make an action roll of your choice, something that could possibly cause the run to end before expected, or grant precious help to a friend in need, or make their next reaction turn easier. Get some momentum on your side. There are also some special actions you can take during a run. These are often problematic, basically. So first turn, for example, it could be a bad call. So even if all the adventurers scored at least a basic success, one of them misjudges their move and falls behind. Here they have the enemy or trap turns out to be even more dangerous than it looks. That hurts. Adventurers who lose at least 2 grit during the next reaction roll also become hurt or poisoned. You could be taken by surprise, so during your next reaction roll, you can't make use of feats or luck. During your second turn, maybe you can find a detour, and the run duration increases by 1. Maybe you could have fire and brimstone appear, and all action rolls you make are considered dangerous. Your bag or clothes could get stuck, so you have to leave behind a bag, backpack, or weapon, or lose 6 grit. Ouch. Third turn, maybe there's a trap in your way, a trigger trap, and you have to make a reaction roll skull right away. You could trigger a chain reaction, making the entire run worse. And during the next reaction turn, you have to make extreme reaction roll skulls. That's real bad. Dead ends, you have extremely high waterfall or something like that, blocking the way out. You have 1 action turn to try your best to hide or stop the source of danger, otherwise you immediately lose the run. I absolutely love this image here. We've got a creepy sort of mummy here and a few more lurking in the background, and then this pharaoh mummy covered in brilliant stuff, carrying a terrifying weapon. Just looks awesome. Supernatural threats. So you can decide the level of supernaturality in your campaign beforehand. So are things supernatural? It could be yes, but it doesn't seem that way, like Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Last Crusade. No, but it appears to be means there are no actual supernatural enemies, but it kind of looks that way. Yes, and it appears to be means there are supernatural elements that are clear and there's no room for doubt. No, and it doesn't appear to be means there's only legends and superstitions, but no actual supernatural. Or you could have nobody knows, where you just leave it up to the director to decide. And then you can have different kinds of supernatural stuff. You can have supernatural locations, supernatural enemies, supernatural rivals, supernatural treasure. Alright, so supernatural enemies, they have some interesting characteristics. So they get supernatural feats, monstrous skills or features that make them especially fearsome. They get 3 special grit boxes to activate special actions. They have special actions that automatically trigger when the enemy fills in one of these bad boxes. They have 6 unique actions that they can take during a run, and they have minions, which are loyal allies that share one of their feats. A supernatural enemy can rely on 6 feat points, which the director can use to assign unique and powerful supernatural feats. And every supernatural feat has an assigned cost between 1 and 3 FP, feat points. And then here's an example of bad boxes scattered amongst the grit track of an enemy. And whenever you cross out a bad box, the enemy immediately uses one of their special actions. And supernatural enemy will know up to 4 of them. And there's some pretty cool ones, pretty scary ones. So supernatural feats, we've got Beast for 1 FP. You get -1 to adventurers who are rolling to strike the enemy barehanded. Blind Devotion, adventurers cannot scare, persuade, or bribe the enemy in any way and suffer -1 rolling to deceive them. It's 2 FP. Cursed Touch, 2 FP. Adventurers who fail to score at least a basic success during their reaction turn become weak. If they're already weak, they lose 1 additional grit. Dark Senses, 2 FP. The adventurer can never hide from the enemy and suffers -1 to all rolls made to surprise them, and partial cover gives you no benefit. Deadly Poison, 2 FP. If you don't score at least a basic success during your reaction, you become poisoned. If you're already poisoned, you lose 1 more grit. Elemental Fury, 1 FP. The enemy can control 1 or several elements and use them to hinder their opponents or strike at them. They can strike at a distance or even without weapons. Force of Nature, 3 FP. They're huge and powerful. Adventurers suffer -1 to all brawl rolls made against them, and all opposed rolls where brute strength plays a role. Immortal, they're undead or a revenant or something else like that. They have an immunity to bullets, explosions, and fire damage, and they don't need to breathe. Surge, 2 FP. They can use a special action immediately when combat begins. That's rough. Swarm, 1 FP. They can dissolve into a swarm of insects or bats or swirling sand and fog. They can move through cage bars and narrow spaces, and once per turn, when the enemy loses grit, the swarm disperses. The next adventurer to attack suffers -1 to their roll to strike. Tail, 2 FP. They get a long tail or similar extra limb and get a +1 basic to the enemy attack. An adventurer who wields a bladed weapon can cut off the enemy's tail by succeeding in an action roll with difficulty equal to the enemy's defense. That's kind of cool. And we got Walking Corpse, 1 FP. So these are the undead. Adventurers suffer -1 when rolling to hit the enemy with firearms or ranged weapons. Once defeated, the enemy must be dismembered before 3 turns have passed, or they will rise again with half of their grit. Cool. And special actions. There are also special actions in the other Outgunned books, so you can use those as well. But here we have a few designed for supernatural enemies. So the Bitter End, the enemy launches themselves at you, and the adventurer is immediately at risk of being left for dead and must take a spin on the death roulette. Burst of Magic. If the adventurer fails a 2 critical reaction roll skull in crime plus awareness, they become weak. If you're already weak, you are now broken. Frenzy, the enemy is blinded by rage and doesn't feel pain. So until the end of the turn, nothing can cause them to lose grit. Yikes. Furious Charge, they charge against 1 adventurer. If the adventurer fails a 2 critical reaction roll skull in Brawn plus Endure, they become hurt. If they're already hurt, they're now broken. Mind Control, you have to make an opposed roll in Focus plus Endure. The director can use 6 dice for the roll. If the adventurer fails, the director takes control of their adventurer sheet until the other adventurers find a way to bring them back to their senses or they run out of grit. Monstrous Cry, the enemy shouts or roars, and adventurers who fail basic reaction rolls in Nerves plus Endure become stunned. Power Unleashed, the enemy stops holding back and gains a new supernatural feat chosen by the director. Preempt, the enemy keeps a watchful eye and reads their next move. So anytime the adventurer states they want to make an assist or spend 1 luck, the enemy butts in and preempts their move, and the adventurer loses 1 grit instead. Restrain, the enemy uses their power, their minions, or the surrounding environment to restrain the adventurers. So if you fail a basic reaction roll in Brawn plus Force, you're restrained and suffer a hindrance to all rolls. You can break free with a critical action roll or if another adventurer uses their turn to help them. Shatter, they grab your weapon and melt it or shatter it completely, and it can't be repaired. To me, the enemy calls their loyal minions and runs away, so you're now immediately engaged in combat with their minions, and the enemy has escaped. You dare? After being struck by an adventurer, the enemy tosses them aside, traps them, or lands a powerful strike, so during the next action turn, the adventurer can use only their free quick action, but they cannot roll the dice. Rough. Then there's the possibility, of course, of running from a supernatural enemy. We have here our scary pharaoh mummy again. And every supernatural enemy comes with 6 actions they can take during a run. So they give an example of the enemy unleashing a sandstorm, so you roll Brawn plus Survival. You'll use their attack difficulty here to do that. The director is free to choose which action to take during every run turn, or they can randomize it with a die. And then minions, they're supernatural enemies. They will share 1 feat with their master, and they're common enemies in most regards, but they do have a supernatural feat from that creature they sworn fealty to, but you shouldn't use 3 FP supernatural feats for common minions. They're too powerful. I do mention that you could have possibly friendly minions. They've managed to break free of the mind control of their evil overlord, and they might help you out. Could be an interesting twist to a adventure. Then we have a bunch of supernatural enemies, which we saw on the cards as well. The Pharaoh's Mummy. I won't spoil all this cool stuff. There's the Abominable Yeti. We've got the Mighty Warlock. The Nagini, which is a particularly cool one. And then supernatural rivals. So these are the center of a plot in a cinematic campaign. So they also have additional characteristics, truly extraordinary. They can rely on the extraordinary individual strong spot and are fearsome in battle. Full power. So the supernatural rival takes on their full power only during the moment of truth in the campaign. The examples of supernatural enemies that they show are opponents who already reached their full power. And they will be weak to the treasure. So the treasure will always be the key to defeating the rival in some way. They also have some supernatural enemies, including rivals, will have a weakness that the adventurers can exploit. So, for example, they talk about the Fae in European myth are weak to cold iron. You can have holy weapons. They're one-of-a-kind artifacts, which grant some help when fighting against a supernatural enemy or rival. And then we get into 2 adventures, how we actually run our adventures. So we have the difference between shots and cinematic campaigns. A cinematic campaign is a string of shots to create a complex plot. And you have additional tools there like heat and camp scenes. So the treasure is unique, shiny, enshrouded in mystery and the focal point of every adventure. But it's also the object of desire of some fearsome rival who could be supernatural. Sometimes you don't end up bringing the treasure home at all because you need to actually expend it to stop something terrible happening, or, it's better off where it is because it's protecting the world from something terrible. All these kinds of things can happen as well. Or you might get the treasure and be able to study and learn something cool from it or gain power from it. And the rival will be somebody who's cunning, well-prepared, and resourceful, but they can't be reasoned with. So they're trying to get their hands on the treasure for all the worst reasons, and you'll have to stop them. And they give you lots of tools to set up a memorable rival confrontation. So first you want to think about, in a cinematic campaign, what sets you off on the path of adventure. Is it, the work of a lifetime? Is it dedication to your country? You want to keep things out of the wrong hands? Maybe you're left with no choice somehow. And then when they talk about the structure of a cinematic campaign, so you got your pilot shot. So this is where you start off the adventure and should give you some room to get into the game, know your companions, but also introduce the theme and tone. Here's some classic examples like the expedition. So you begin all gathered together, setting off to find the treasure. They might even have a key item to point them in the right direction. There's the MacGuffin. So you're already in the middle of a wild location or temple and you're looking for an artifact that may not have anything to do with your impending adventure, but you get an important clue that leads you to the real treasure. Or you might be having an accident. So you're doing a dig, you accidentally discover a new burial chamber, and suddenly you're on the pathway to adventure and a rival starts chasing you. Could be a lot of fun, and I would agree with that. Sounds really cool. Point of no return is a special shot that leaves the adventurers either physically or metaphorically with no way back. Basically, you've got to give everything from this point. There are 4 classic moments that mark the perfect point of no return. So you're far away from civilization, the rival's done something that made it personal, and you have to stop them. You've been trapped or locked into a tomb or temple, so you have to get your way through. And there's some kind of supernatural fury, which made its existence known. Basically, at this point, it's a real turning point in the adventure, and you're now completely entangled against the rival, and it's a desperate race to the finish. Then you have the moment of truth, which is the final shot at the end of the campaign. So you'll have to make difficult choices, you'll have to pay dearly for progress, you'll have to face your rival. At the point of no return, you also get to make an advancement, so you gain new feats and skill points to represent your personal growth. And at the beginning of a moment of truth, you can also advance. That gives you an extra little boost right before you go into the final battle. And from this moment, the heat stops rising, and the adventurers who use a spotlight cannot flip a coin in order to keep it. So spotlights are one done. That's it. They talk about the key and the clues. So the key is an item you need in order to reach the treasure. Could be a map, or it's something you need to decipher, or a staff with a jewel that will light your path. We've all seen those kind of things before. And then along the way, you should find some clues that help you discover where you will find the treasure and where you need to apply this key item. And they mention as well, a cinematic campaign could be envisaged as one part of a movie franchise. And then from there, you could go to a sequel or a prequel or a spin-off. All kinds of interesting things could happen. Then they give a little bit of detail about the travel journal. So this is something that's used by the whole group. And we saw it before. You can write down what happens in each shot. You can mark the advancement points, the heat points, what you know about the rival, etc. And then the treasure. So it should be an ancient artifact, lost, maybe forgotten, but it's also dangerous and shrouded in mystery. And here we have what looks like the old sword and stone Excalibur. The role of the treasure could be varied. So, maybe you're looking for it to shed light on some great discovery or truth. Maybe you want it for wealth. You want to make yourself famous. Maybe this treasure helps you learn about something in your family line. Maybe it was a challenge that you need to undertake to teach your rival a lesson or prove yourself to somebody. Maybe it's just your dream as an action archaeologist. Or it could be a coincidence that you have another goal and it turns out the treasure is the way to advance it, so you got to go for it. Treasures will be guarded by guardians who often act in the shadows using webs of spies. They might be beholden to ancient traditions, might use ceremonial weapons. They can be allies if you're using the treasure for something good, but they can also become terribly dangerous if you're going against their wishes. Then the treasure's true nature will be revealed during the moment of truth. So it could be the treasure's not what you thought. Maybe it's less spectacular than you thought, and it's more about giving you some humbling lesson. Maybe it's actually a divine weapon or something terribly destructive. Maybe you can't take it away, because if it's taken away, disaster will befall the world or whoever lives nearby. Or finally, it could be that the treasure was just a myth, and in fact, it was just a dream that's led many adventurers to their doom. Let me give you some example treasures. Again, I'll leave for you to discover yourselves. And then some talk about your rivals. Here's a guy with an interesting fake Nazi image there. So the rival will have 2 or 3 strong spots, which they choose from here. So they could have a private army, they could have unlimited funding, they could be extraordinary individual, very mighty and strong, could be supernatural. They could be luminary, so they're a genius. They could be a survivor, so they're very capable of living through all kinds of crap. They could have occult knowledge and paranormal knowledge. They could control the territory in the area where you need to go. Or they could have leverage on the adventurers themselves. They also should have some weak spots. It could be a literal weak spot, like a bad leg or, one ear that doesn't work or something like that. It also could be a personality flaw. Something that is about their connections to other people. They'll give up anything to protect their daughter or whatever, so you can use that against them. And the rival will have a dark desire, something they want to achieve, and the treasure will allow them to achieve that. And it'll be completely against the adventurers and what they're setting out to do. And hopefully, when the moment of truth comes, they will have to pay for their bad deeds in trying to push their desires forward. Facing the rival, so the rival can only really lose during a moment of truth, and there'll be a hindrance up until the moment of truth. Whenever the adventurers interact with them, they always roll with a hindrance, and you can't spend a spotlight to hurt, capture, or swindle the rival unless you're playing the moment of truth. The rival is cunning, so they're always one step ahead. The rival is also a bit stupid, so they're never more than one step ahead. And they got some classic rival possibilities here: the warlord, the Nazi occultist, the ambitious professor, the young heir, a rebel leader, an old friend, came back to haunt you from the past. And we got a little capybara there. I don't know why. We got the perfect enemies. So the Aharnabe, these are the supernatural division of the SS. Then we got the heat meter. So it's a clock that goes from 1 to 12. Each time you fail a crucial objective, get captured or lose a fight, don't win a race or whatever, the heat is a tool the director can use to give weight and consequences to big mistakes. Heat goes up when you wander around before finding a landmark, or if you get bruised up in a fight. And heat rises by 1 when you get the point of no return. Somebody's left for dead, when you waste time or linger too long at camp, when you get captured, the first time you meet a supernatural threat, if the rivals are in the lead or on top of you. But once the moment of truth begins, the heat stops rising until the end of the campaign. Now, the impact of heat is that the director can get heat points at certain levels, 6, 9, and 12, basically. So they can spend heat points to cause some effects. They can make it unrelenting. All adventurers add a lethal bullet to their death roulette. Tripping hazard, so it allows the director to add an obstacle or hindrance in the adventurer's path, to trigger a trap they'd managed to avoid, or to turn the adventurer's success in an unexpected failure. Could be, I'll take that, so the rival manages to steal the key or another important item, or it could also be used to remove a spotlight from somebody. Ouch. They could set an ambush for the adventurers, so for the entire combat, because you're taken completely by surprise, you can't rely on any of your feats. Someone close to you could double cross you, or maybe you learned they betrayed you and you didn't notice. It happened already ages ago. Or finally, when you reach your next objective, you can find the rival waiting for you already. This is kind of setting a sense of urgency to the campaign. Then we've got your camp phase. So this is your safe spot where you can relax and focus on activities you don't have time for during the adventure parts of the campaign. In Outgunned, we had the timeout. This is kind of like that. So the camp is when you get to talk freely amongst yourselves, recover grit, and get ready for what's to come. You can take longer actions like fixing stuff, repairing your weapons or your vehicles or whatever. But it has to be in a safe place. You can't have dangerous beasts around or something like that. Then you have your camp actions, so you can investigate to gather gather clues. You can heal a condition from yourself or somebody else. You can fix an object, weapon, or ride. You can provide comfort, giving the positive relaxed condition to everyone involved. You can look for resources. You can explore to get a better sense of your surroundings. You can get advice to give the ability to use a feat from a friend until the next camp. Or you can do a generic job, like setting a trap or building a palisade. Whenever all the adventurers have taken 2 camp actions or passed on their chance to do so, then you move on to the next scene. You can also agree to extend your time at camp, but if you do that, you get an additional action while the heat rises by 1, so be careful of that. When you have an opportunity to advance in the campaign, you get 2 skill points to assign wherever you want, 1 feat of your choice amongst all available, regardless of your role and trope, and 1 luck as a reward for your efforts. You get to advance at the point of no return, after the point of no return, and before the moment of truth. Each adventurer can advance 3 times. If you advance again at that point, you can choose to reassign 2 skill points of your choice and or swap out one of your feats for another of your choosing. If you do neither, you gain 1 additional luck. There's a nice sidebar here about slow advancement. So if you want to have a longer campaign, a typical Outgunned Adventure campaign will be about 8 sessions in their view. Then you can make the advancement curve slower by making the advancement cut in half. So just like 1 skill point instead of 2, or you can have it build up. That's a nice idea if you want a longer form campaign. Experiences are something that you get a crucial event in your life that changed you in some way. So it could be an achievement, like you learned a lesson or accomplished something. A scar is when you endured some trauma, happens by default when you are left for dead and come back. A bond is when you earned a friend, lover, or rival. Reputation is when you earn a good or bad reputation, so people have heard about you for some reason. Experiences should be gained pretty regularly. If certain characters aren't getting them, then the director should make efforts to make sure that character gets more spotlight time. It's a way of allowing characters to see that they've had their time in the spotlight and they've done something important. And they give some nice examples here of experiences like achievements like surviving a storm, saving my friends, scars like I'm afraid of snakes, I've seen war, bonds like I don't trust Jane, or I'm in love with Alaska. Reputation could be I destroyed a Nazi encampment or defeated the rival before. That's pretty cool. Experiences are like custom-made feats that can be called into play either by yourself or the director in certain circumstances. They grant you help or impose hindrance at some point in your adventure. Achievements will usually be of help and scars will usually be hindrances, but that's not always the case. Bonds and reputations can be either an advantage or disadvantage depending on the circumstances. Then we have our pilot shot, Frozen Legacy. So we got our same pre-gens again, and a brief little shot to get people into the mode of adventure. And that is the main rulebook. 264 pages of goodness there. Really, really nicely done. You can see, like all Two Little Mice books, it's nicely bound. You got a lovely silk ribbon, which fits the color, the font choices, the layout is great. The art, of course, is fantastic. Now we'll take a quick look through Action Flicks Volume 2. There's a lot of cool stuff in here, and I don't want to spoil too much of it. So I'll just give you a little outline of what each of the flicks is about. And we've got a bunch of them here, as you can see. So we have Star Knights, very similar to Star Wars. Old Ones, which gives you rules for madness and the Cthulhu mythos, basically. Wild West, so you get gun duels and stuff like that in the Wild West. Dark Light is the battle between angels and demons. Mighty Swords is like Conan the Barbarian type stuff. District 77 is like Brooklyn 99. Dino Storm, think Jurassic Park or Jurassic World. Furious Wasteland, think Mad Max or Furiosa. Army of Evil, think Army of Darkness, that kind of stuff. Evil Dead. Quacktails, think DuckTales, basically. And then at the end you have Insert Coin, which allows you to climb into a video game and mix together different flicks as different levels in the video game, which is very cool. There are some new feats in each of the action flicks to customize your heroes for that, but you can also have roles and tropes that have feats from both Outgunned or from Adventure. So these feats that you might need to draw from either of those core books they've included here just to cover people who only have one book or the other, which is nice. If you mix too many action flicks, you run the risk of collapsing reality, but we agree it is also crazy fun. That's a nice warning there. Here we have Star Knights with a lovely VHS motif. You see a laser sword. Look at that. You get new weapons here, Star Swords. 5 new hero feats, the new role of the Star Knight. 3 new tropes, a new mechanic, which is the power, aka the Force. Enemy feats and special actions, and a new pre-gen hero. It's inspired by the Star Wars cinematic saga. Don't listen to what other people say. This is the right order in which to watch the movies. 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9. Trust me. I would just say just 4, 5, 6 and don't watch the others, but that's just me. So core themes are, the old versus the new and the light versus the dark. And the missions could include rebuilding the order of the Star Knights, fighting against the Shadow Knights, who are the polar opposite, the dark side of the Force, if you like, of the power. You could find yourself within the Star Knights, or you could find the Chosen One, Foretold Prophecy of a Young Star Knight. Got new rules for power and darkness, new gear, including the Star Sword and Double Star Sword, which have new qualities. So heroes with feat the power is with me gain +1 when having a powerful weapon. Everybody else gets -1. And they are pure energy weapons, so they can cut any surface with help. They ignore all enemy feats that grant protection or armor of any kind and can never be parried with common melee weapons. Some of them can also deflect incoming attacks, like the Double Star Sword. Then you've got your new hero feats, which include Astral Focus, Inner Peace, Lightning Reflexes, some new tropes as well. Typically you get 3 new tropes in each action flick, and then you get a new role as well. So we have the Star Knight, who's the protector of the galaxy. He's got himself a Star Sword or Double Star Sword for gear. Focus is a attribute point, and he's got skill points in Endure, Fight, Stunt, Cool, Drive, Leadership, Detect, Know, Awareness, and Stealth. And he's got the power is with me by default as a feat, +1 from Acrobat, Astral Focus, Astral Sword Fighter, Inner Peace, and Lightning Reflexes, which are the new feats in this action flick. And then we got some rules for the power. So there's a balance mechanic. You want things to stay in balance. And if you go too far out of balance by doing dark things with your power, then you can have problems. So these are powers that you can have access to. You need to spend adrenaline, aka luck, to use these. You may need to spend extra balance when making an intense effort or attempting a complex action. Balance effectively is taking the place here of luck or adrenaline. So they give some of the basic powers here. You can deviate the trajectory of projectiles. You can halt targets, you can do a force jump, you can persuade people through their mind, you can pull things, push things, read minds, recall your Star Sword back to you, soothe a person or animal, or throw your Star Sword. Dark feats for the Shadow Knights, so they fight with passion, and they can do nasty stuff like force a target to obey your order with control, they can grab or choke a target with grip, they can unleash lightning, or they can torture a target with pain. Ouch. Enemy feats, powerful, which gives them the use of the power, clear mind, a Shadow Knight, energy weapon, Shadow Master, and some new special actions as well. So these can be put in on a hotbox on the enemy's grit track. So power recall, power push, power pull, power choke, power lightning, all that kind of good stuff. And then we've got a blank character sheet with the nice theming for Star Knights and our sample character as well. All right, and then we have a Dark Knight as well as a bad guy. Old one, so here we get into the Cthulhu Mythos action. Very cool, bit of that 1920s flair. 4 new hero feats, 3 new tropes, 1 new role, the Nightmare Investigator. Rules for Madness, new enemy feats and special actions, and a hero, Arthur Carter. Core themes here about sins of the past and forbidden knowledge, very similar to Call of Cthulhu. And some nightmare example missions could be stopping a cult ritual, going on a trip, and something's calling out to you, leaving the city, and you can't for some reason, or you're sent on an expedition and find something terrifying. New rules include Cosmic Horror, which can give you madness, and new gear that can give you the Forbidden feat. Forbidden items are pervaded by a strange dark power, and you must make a critical reaction roll when you use it in Focus plus Cool, and if you fail, you gain 1 madness. So they have things like crystal spheres, grimoires to attack from a distance, Ouija boards to communicate with restless spirits, tarot decks to predict the future, stuff like that. When playing Old Ones, every hero begins the game with a deep scar, and there's no respite. You get 1 additional lethal bullet at the start, and the starting heat is equal to double the number of heroes in play, and when you fail a roll on your death roulette, you are actually dead. Not even a spotlight can save you. That's pretty cool. Then you got your Nightmare Heroes, you got a few additional hero feats, and you could be an esoteric scholar from the sea or a jolly loon. And you got your Nightmare Investigator, focuses on nerves, makes sense for a horror thing. And you've got examples like John Constantine, Ichabod Crane, Harry Dresden, Dana Scully. It's a pretty good example there. They've got skill points in Endure, Force, Cool, Shoot, Survival, Leadership, Know, Detect, Awareness, and Streetwise. And they can choose 2 from some of the feats in this action flick and elsewhere, and they start with just a pistol. Now, Madness is cool. So you can get Madness when you meet Cosmic Horrors. You must roll a critical reaction roll, Nerves plus Cool, with -1 if you're already scared. You fail, you get a Madness. Some enemies, feats, and special actions can put you at risk of madness. Forbidden tomes and artifacts can run you risk of getting madness. And when one of your friends is left for dead or reaches 12 madness, you immediately gain 1 madness and you're haunted forever. And then when you gain 1 madness, you lose a grip box permanently, starting with 1 on the far right. As you keep going, there's no way to remove the madness, and eventually you reach 12, your mind crumbles, and you're trapped in an endless waking nightmare. You also get some gifts from your madness, however. So when you reach 4 madness, you gain 1 gifted madness, which you can count among your feats. So you get some kind of nasty power like a 3rd eye, you can grow tentacles, recover all your grit, but you also pay a price. So you might not trust your friends, you become a kleptomaniac, you smile creepily at everything, or you must live in the darkness as the light hurts your eyes. Got some new enemy feats: Abyssal Fury, Horrible Tentacles, Nightmare. Special actions like trapping you in a hallucination, Agony, Friendly Whispers, and Deathly Echoes. And then we've got our example character here, Arthur Carter, the Nightmare Investigator. And then we're into the Wild West with a very cool female hero illustration here. So here you find the condition of exhausted, 4 new hero feats, 1 new role, which is the gunslinger, 3 new tropes, rules for quick draw duels, and Trinity Westwood, the gunslinger hero. And they give you some really nice list of westerns to watch, and also Red Dead Redemption. Then they have core themes of hard life on the frontier, law versus chaos. And we've got our lovely orange Action Flicks Volume 2 bookmark here. Typical missions could be protecting a town from ruthless outlaws, a manhunt for an infamous criminal, doing a big heist, or standing up to authority. Freeing people from oppression. New rules, you got outlaws and sheriffs, you got horses and carriages, you got a new condition for exhausted, so -1 to all rolls that require focus and enduring effort. So that's from being overheated in the desert of the West. You can remove the condition by drinking water and resting. Then we got new feats for heroes: Eyes of Steel, Fast Reload, Hair Trigger, and Rider. You can be a kind brute, a hero with no name, or a right hand of the devil. Then we got our gunslinger. She gets a revolver, a knife, and a horse. Some nice examples: Trinity, and They Call Me Trinity, Buster Scruggs in The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, and Django in Django Unchained. Having a tribute point in nerves, skill points in fight, stunt, cool, shoot, survival, flirt, leadership, heal, awareness, and dexterity. And they choose 2 feats, some of which are from the current action flick, and some of which are from the core books. So pretty cool. Quick Draw is a set of dueling rules. It was actually really cool. I won't go into it right now because it's more fun to give it a try yourself. But basically, you build a pool based on 9 dice plus 1 die per point in cool, dexterity, and shoot. And then you spend those dice against your challenger in 3 stages: a stare-off, draw, and shot. And it gives you a nice example of how that all works. It's really cool. And then we have Trinity Westwood's character sheet. And then move on to Dark Light, another really fantastic illustration. We have Angels versus Demons, and got new Plan Bs, which are from Outgunned Core. They don't appear in Outgunned Adventure. Got 4 new hero feats, 1 new role, the Emissary, 3 new tropes, 2 new tags, Angel and Demon, otherworldly feats, new enemy feats, and a hero, Lilith the Demon Emissary. They give you some nice advice to watch Good Omen, Supernatural, Lucifer, Ghost Rider, Hellboy, Devil May Cry, etc. Core themes are good versus evil, of course, and the grand design. So is it good or bad that the Almighty has a grand design for the universe? Well, maybe it's not as good as we thought. Otherworldly missions could include things like the apocalypse, angels and demons working together for some reason, something getting out of control from hell or from heaven for that matter, or your superiors from above or below may have called you to deal with a situation. New rules, you've got 3 game modes: Angels versus Demons, Demons versus Angels, or Angels and Demons. And you get acquainted with 2 new terms: Holy and Unholy. Holy is everything associated with goodness and purity, angelic entities, etc. Unholy is evil and corrupted things: demons, bat wings, parasites, hellfire. You got Blasphemy and Blessing Plan Bs, and they give you the backup Plan B benefits, basically. Angels and Demons have an unholy or holy aura that can be easily detected by otherworldly creatures, but only certain humans can catch a whiff of these. Otherworldly heroes can have new feats like Cursed or Blessed, Holy or Unholy Weapon, Otherworldly Connection, Otherworldly Knowledge. You can be an anguished cynic, a grumpy rebel, or too sweet. Then you've got the Emissary role. So we got Aziraphale and Crowley in Good Omens, Jesse Custer in Preacher, Mary Poppins in Mary Poppins, James Wesley in Daredevil. So their attribute point is in Smooth. They have skill points in Fight, Drive, Leadership, Speech, Style, Detect, Know, Awareness, Stealth, and Streetwise. And they can get 2 feats amongst key new feats in this action flick, or Outsmart and Silver Tongue. They get Elegant Clothes and one $1 item of their choice. They have Angel and Demon otherworldly feats. Could be Celestial, Infernal, Heal or Harm, Resurrection, Teleportation, Transfiguration, Wings, Wisdom of Babel. And then we got new enemies that could have otherworldly weapons, they could fly, they could be biblically accurate, which gives you -1 to all nerve rolls made against the enemy because they're creepy. Ever returning, so they keep coming back, they can't be defeated for good. Or angels are archfiends. Common weapons and barehanded attacks have no effect on them. Special actions could be Help Me, Please, Repositioning, giving you a teleportation, Dreadful Aura, Final Form, where they transform into a terrible creature as well. And then we have our example emissary Lilith from the Demons. Then we got Mighty Swords. This is our Conan the Barbarian action flick. We've got new gear, 4 new hero feats, 1 new role, the Barbarian, 3 new tropes, new enemy feats and special actions, a new hero, Sarah the Barbarian. It's a relatively straightforward one. So the core themes here are about journey, discovery, and the source of strength from a hero. And you'll have mythical adventures like Conan did, fighting evil warlords like sorcerers, demigods, or other tyrants. You might brave an ancient dungeon or abandoned mine to look for great treasure or stop an ancient curse. Maybe you need to protect the good folk of a village, or you might need to fulfill a prophecy. And there's some new rules. So magic is always bad. In a sword and sorcery story, it always enacts a high cost, and wizards and warlocks are dangerous people. Epic fighters. So for them, the basic difficulty levels are different. So bending metal bars with their bare hands is only basic. Extreme is things like withstanding a magic spell, fighting a small army, facing off a vengeful demigod. So we're really on a different level of power here. Heroic fantasy. They also get the plan B of Blade if you're using original Outgunned, and your resource is no longer adrenaline or luck, it is now might. And you can get it if you put yourself in danger, you do heroic things, you protect the weak, you humiliate a stronger enemy, or you become part of a legend. Then we've got new weapon feats: sharp, single shot, impact, bulky, handy, piercing, reach, slow reload, and throwing. Again, range only comes into account if you're using the full combat rules from Outgunned Original. Then we got some stats for weapons appropriate to this kind of medieval-esque era: short bows, heavy bows, crossbows, staves, spears, axes, swords, shields, etc. New feats, including Battle Cry, Bulwark, can carry bulky weapons while wearing armor. Mythical Warrior, Trick Shots. You can be an Honorable Savage, Old Code. So you have a strict moral code, or you can be a Warrior Prince/Princess. And then we have our Barbarian. Looks very much like Red Sonja, and in fact, she's one of the listed inspirations, along with Conan. Their points, of course, are in Brawn. Skill points in Endure, Fight, Force, Cool, Survival, Leadership, Heal, Dexterity, Stealth, and Streetwise. Feats can be amongst the 4 new feats outlined here. Mythical Warrior, Trick Shot included. You can get 2 weapons of their choice, or a weapon of choice and a shield. New enemies could have armor, battle nets to trap opponents, fearsome warriors. Certain weapons can't use free rerolls against them. Evil sorcerers can do spells to nullify feats once per combat, and other bad stuff. Special actions include throwing Greek fire, breaking weapons, calling reinforcements, or using unspeakable sorcery. And then we have Sarah, our barbarian, as the sample character. Now we get District 77, which is like Brooklyn 99. One of my favorite comedies of all time. We've got new gear, new non-lethal weapons, the plan B, 3 new hero feats, 1 new role, the rookie, 3 new tropes, rules for buddy mode, Nora Wu, rookie. So they give you some action homework, including the rookie, Brooklyn 99, of course, Hot Fuzz, Lethal Weapon. Core themes are law and justice and the duty of the cop to their community. Cop missions could be, somebody's attacking the police station, the city hall, or the White House. You set out for a normal workday and end up with a crazy, delicate mission. Maybe you've got to stop some evildoers before tragedy strikes, or you've got a killer on the loose and you've got to stop them. New rules include badges, 2 days away from the pension if you're an old hero, and a new plan B called Buddy, which instead of the usual backup. Also get some new gear, including tasers, other non-lethal weapons like smoke bombs, rubber bullets, batons, and handcuffs. And weapons that say issue, which is everything except smoke bombs, mean you get those for all law enforcement officers. You get new feats, including new recruit beginner's luck. High-ranking members will get +1 to smooth. Too old for this, if you fail action rolls, you get to build up free rerolls for the future, thanks to the knowledge you've accumulated. They owe me one you can call in old debts. You can be by the book, detective nerd, and loose cannon. And then you've got the rookie, who looks suspiciously like Amy Santiago. She is focused on smooth as an attribute point, with skill points in fight, drive, shoot, speech, leadership, style, detect, heal, know, and stealth. You choose 2 from the new feats listed in the action flick, and 1 item of your choice. And then we got buddy mode. So this is 2 partners fighting crime side by side. You can have buddy actions where you assemble your pools together to deal with certain things that you can help each other with. You can disagree, and then you have a conflict, and you can have relationship issues, which you roll out on these tables. Then that will spice up the storyline you're telling. And here we have Sarah Wu, our rookie cop from District 77. And we got Dino Storm. Excellent. If you're a Jurassic Park fan, this is the way to go. So we got 5 new feats, 3 new tropes, new dinosaur enemies, new enemy feats, new special actions, and a hero, Regina Grant, the captain. So core themes, of course, man versus nature, and life finding a way, and also life being precious, even if it's scary. Jurassic missions could include escaping from an island overrun by dinosaurs, sounds familiar, saving the dinosaurs from bad people, dinosaurs running amok, or a theme park for dinosaurs turns into a fight for survival. Also sounds familiar. There's new rules here that there's two types of enemy dinosaurs. There's dinosaurs up to about the size of a pickup truck. Big dinosaurs are much larger, like the famous T-Rex or colossal Gigantosaurus. And basically all you can do is run away or set a trap for them or something like that. If you have the World of Killers expansion, you can also use the dog trainer role, but instead of a dog, you could have a inseparable, scaly, tamed dinosaur friend. How cool is that? You also get some new feats: paleontology, runners, survival instinct, told you so, and veterinarian to care for wounded animals. You can be an action paleontologist instead of an action archaeologist, animal lover, or a chaos theorist. If you want to be Jeff Goldblum. Dinosaur enemies, they could be clever lizards, wild senses, camouflage, curved claws for more damage. They could fly. They might be a tiny pack of bastards. They might be too quick. They could have venom sacs. They could have horns, impenetrable hide, or a spiked tail. Yikes. On-demand dinosaurs. So here we have flocks of Compsognathus, little guys, Dilophosauruses, Velociraptors, pterodactyls, Stegosauruses, more Velociraptors, Ankylosaurus, and young Triceratops. And then big dinosaurs. So you can feed them with traps, a big dinosaur friend, if you've made one by helping their young or something like that, dangerous plans, or a desperate last stand. And here they give you some reaction rolls if you're on a run from them, or reaction rolls if you're trying to get away on a ride. That's pretty cool. And then you've got your sample character, which is Regina Grant, the captain. Now we got Furious Wasteland. If you're a Fallout fan or a Mad Max fan, this is for you. Get new gear, new scrap weapons, 4 hero feats, 3 new tropes, 1 new role, and a new hero, Madison Miller, the Dweller. I tell you to watch Fallout and Mad Max, incidentally. Core themes are about starting over when the world has been destroyed by ourselves, and living in safety versus living in freedom. So the wasteland connotes freedom, but it's very dangerous. So there's a conflict there that can drive interesting storytelling we saw in Fallout. Wasteland missions, maybe you've lost someone and you're looking for them. You might want to try and heal the world. Maybe you're trying to head back to where you originally came from, if it's still there. Or you might wake up with no idea what happened, but everything's been destroyed while you were asleep. New rules, so there's no cash anymore. So instead you have 1 useless item, 1 everyday item, and 1 common weapon or piece of gear with the scrap feat. There's also mutant beasts around, there are pieces of junk around. You can have steel limbs and mechanical arms. They also talk about playing as ghouls using the zombie heroes from the Army of Evil action flick. How cool is that? New gear can have the scrap function, so it's in truly terrible condition or was repaired one time too many. You could need a motor, means you have to use a quick action to start it. If you fail that roll twice, however, you'll run out of gas and the item becomes useless until you recharge it with gas. Heavy metal means it's made of metal entirely and is very heavy. If you have less than 3 points in force and don't have big and strong feats, you get -2 to all rolls to use it. Junk shooters can fire all manner of junk at people, and the Inferno spits fire. So that's some cool stuff. And gasoline, of course, which reloads motor weapon. Mechanical arms grant +1 to brawn rolls, -1 to dexterity. They get new feats: Furious Pilot, Jackal, Steel Scrap and Junk, Road Warriors, and Witness. You can be a furious fighter, a last knight, or an unwavering optimist. Then we have our Dweller in the Wasteland. Points in focus, skill points in endure, stunt, shoot, survival, speech, detect, fix, heal, stealth, and streetwise. 2 feats amongst the new ones, or Silver Tongue, and starts with nothing gear-wise. And we have our sample here, who is Madison Miller, the Dweller. We got the Army of Evil. Looks like Ada, I think, from Resident Evil. So yeah, here we have the dead waking from their slumber and walking the earth. So you got new gear, new slasher weapons, 4 new feats, 3 new tropes, a new zombie tag, new zombie enemies, new horror actions for your enemies, and a new hero, Ashley Valentine. Core themes are about survival and about fear. Fear of the dark, fear of the unknown, and the inescapable shadow of death. Zombies are a great summation of that fear. So your missions might include stopping the zombie apocalypse, saving a VIP from the apocalypse, saving something of great value from the zombies, or protecting a fortified haven from siege. New rules, so you want to decide from the beginning if you want slow zombies, fast zombies, or smart zombies. There are 4 different ways to get new advantages when fighting your opponents. So you can add a lethal bullet to your death roulette to gain an adrenaline to spend immediately. You can add 2 lethal bullets to gain a spotlight, which you must spend immediately. And during a timeout, you can spend an action confiding in a friend, and then the one making the confession loses 1 lethal bullet, which gets taken on by the listener. That's pretty cool. Ultimate sacrifice, you may save a friend who has failed their roll on the death roulette by sacrificing yourself. Death of a true hero. Then you got new slasher weapons and motor weapons similar to what we saw in the Wasteland. The slashers, basically that means if you get to a horror box of an enemy with this weapon, flip a coin and there's a 50% chance that the director can't use that action. All zombies struck by a weapon with the slasher feat lose an amount of extra grit equal to the slasher score, which is between 1 and 3. So a chainsaw has a slasher of 3, for example. Horror heroes, you can have new feats like Carnage, Fearless, Immune, you don't get anything by being bit from zombies, Spirit of Sacrifice, you can be a Final Girl, that's great, Housewares Clerk or Next Door Hero, and then Zombie Heroes, you can basically take any of the normal roles and add the zombie tag to it, and then you gain the Undead feat to give up one of the other feats. So you're a zombie, but you didn't lose your mind, you're immune to all conditions, and the bad box becomes a horror box. You can make an extra action roll when you fill in your horror box, or to gain 1 adrenaline. If you do so, the rush also causes you to lose a limb or another body part, and you can reattach those during a timeout or camp. When a hero gets bitten by a zombie, they immediately become hurt, and then after that, you flip a coin to determine what happens. When they become broken, then they become in suspended animation, and then they wake up as undead at the end of the scene. An optional rule is that if you have 3 points in Smooth or Flirt, and you turn into a zombie, you can choose to move one of those points to another attribute or skill of your choice, to represent the fact that you're gross now. Zombie enemies have no enemy feats unless they're fast or smart, and they have up to 4 horror boxes. They look like the little skulls there, you can see. The optional rule of Bite: all heroes who have lost at least 3 grit must roll 2 dice. Anyone who scores a double 1 or the equivalent was bitten, and then you got to deal with that. Horror actions, they can do things like mob you, disarm you, take your weapon, get revenge on the attacker, losing you the same amount of grit you just took from them. They can grab you, making you being forced to escape. They can get back up and get 3 more grit boxes, or they can overcome you with murder, and if you don't have any adrenaline to lose, then you will add a lethal bullet to your death roulette. And we got a bunch of on-demand zombies, and our new army of evil Ashley Valentine, who's the nobody. Quacktails, so this is calling back to the DuckTales cartoon. We've got 1 new weapon feat, Plunger, new Plan B, which allows you to use your cartoonness to your advantage, 5 new tropes, a new tag, Toon feats, and Mallard Jones, a Toon Daredevil. So we have core themes of friendship and discovery. Missions could be finding treasures, sounds very adventure-y, special delivery to a friend, a rescue mission, or masked vigilantes if you want to be Toon superheroes of a fashion. Got some new rules for Duck and Mice stories. You can get temporary conditions at the end of any scene. The director can allow all heroes to remove all conditions without asking for a roll. You get the plunger gun and plunger rifle, which are non-lethal, and the plungers become stuck to a surface, so they can be a handhold to help you climb, and you can strike at any distance, no matter the range, if you're using the range rules. If anybody gets knocked out by a non-lethal weapon, they just surrender or faint or get KO'd. Bidimensional as Plan B lets you use your cartoonish abilities to laugh in the face of physics. You also never run the risk of being left for dead as a cartoon hero. You never take a spin on the death roulette. You just KO and faint if you run out of grit, and the next scene you're back up. If all heroes get KO'd at the same time, then the enemy will capture them and take them back to their lair. And then you got your quack tropes: Brilliant Inventor, Lucky Dandy, Stingy Uncle, Surly Sailor, and Three's Company. And Toon Heroes, so this is like the zombie thing. You can gain a Toon tag. You are the role that you chose, but you're also a cartoon, maybe even an anthropomorphic animal. You can swap 1 or 2 of your role feats with a Toon feat, including things like Boing, which means you can bounce back and hit an enemy who hit you. You could have a bottomless bag full of stuff, or you could be clumsy to get an automatic success in a blundering way instead of rolling the dice. There's lots more too: Dumb Luck, Flying, I Never Learned Physics, you want to be like Wile E. Coyote or the Roadrunner, and Teeny, really small. Then we got an example of Mallard Jones, the Toon Daredevil. Then we have Insert Coin, which is our mix and match action flick. So this allows you to enter a video game world with a new tag called Virtual. You have virtual feats, a new role for the NPC, 2 new game modes, new virtual gear, and a new hero, John Doe the NPC. So virtual heroes, 2 game modes. You can be stuck online, so you're in a game in order to get out by going through all the levels. Or you could be in and out, where you live in the near future, where you can jump in and out of VR or whatever, and you have 2 character sheets, 1 for real life and 1 for virtual. You got some new virtual feats, which give you extra lives, glitches, heavy machine guns, no matter what you're doing. Limit break attacks, make a single attack with 9 dice. When you get your bad box, infinite cash, power-ups. And then you got the NPC, look at that, it reminds me of Free Guy, which was a fantastic movie. Ryan Reynolds. Attributes, get 2 of your choice: skills and endure, fight, force, drive, survival, flirt, speech, style, fixed, heal, no, dexterity, stealth, and streetwise. You get a big load of feats to choose from, including the new ones, and 2 pieces of gear of your choice. Then you've got the Stuck Online mode, so you have 3 lives between yourself and game over, and your game will be organized into levels, each of which will have different rules. So for example, you could have each level be a different action flick, which means you would be subject to the rules of that action flick when you transfer to that level. You can also have some new gear for your virtual life: extra lives, super mushrooms, small chests, flash bombs, old maps, red shoes to go fast, and superstar for being invincible. For the in and out mode, then you'll need to have a real life and a virtual life, But if you lose in the game all of your lives, then the next time you go back in, you'll have no virtual gear and cash and remove a skill point of your choice. So your virtual self will get weaker if you do lose. And here we have a sample NPC, John Doe. Very cool. And that's it for Action Flicks Volume 2. There's a huge filmography here to check out. This book will self-destruct in 5 seconds, so I'm going to close it. And there you go. That is my preview of Outgunned Adventure. Really excited once again by what Two Little Mice have brought us. It's really high quality stuff right the way through. Looks like a lot of fun and quite varied and different from the original Outgunned in its own special way. So I hope you enjoyed seeing this. Let me know if you have any more questions about any of the stuff that was included here. I'll be sure to cover it in a future video. Any other comments, let me know in the comment section down below, of course. And if you like what I'm doing, please do click the bell and subscribe and follow my videos in the future. If you want to support what I'm doing in a more material way, then feel free to buy me a coffee using the Ko-fi link down below. In any case, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this look at Outgunned Adventure deep dive style, and I look forward to seeing you again in the future. In the meantime, take care and bye-bye.